3. In the 16th century, Leonardo da Vinci, after performing various dissections and anatomical studies, claimed that the soul could be physically found in the human body, specifically in the brain. The idea was that the soul had to be where three particular parts of the brain connected: the part where senses are received, the part where memory is stored, and the part where our will lives. Da Vinci, being an artist, believed that place to be right here, the third ventricle, just above where the left eye and the right eye connect. To quote the man himself, "The eye, the window of the soul, is the chief means whereby understanding can most fully and abundantly appreciate the infinite works of nature." But if the soul can be found physically inside of us, if it remains consistent, shaping who we are despite the vast changes our body goes through, what happens if we were to, say, clone ourselves? Or upload our senses, memory and will into a database that perceives the world like we do right now? Would our soul be copied, split in two? And what ramifications does that have for the afterlife? If the clone dies, does only half of your soul go to heaven? I don't have the answers to any of those questions, but if Leonardo da Vinci broke into my house, tied me to a chair and put a gun to my head, I'd probably just start crying and tell him to play SOMA. SOMA was developed by Frictional Games, best known for 2010's Amnesia: The Dark Descent. While the DNA of Amnesia is certainly present here, this is a game that has an altogether different horror focus. The monsters do slobber and roar, interacting with them is stripped back to playing hide and seek, and the game's been criticised for embracing that playstyle.
SOMA is a science fiction horror game that is not nearly as scary as it may first appear.
But when we talk about SOMA's horror, we shouldn't just box it into how we engage with its monsters. Its writing, its conditioning, its atmosphere, and its choice system is where its true brilliance shines. And if you settle in to play it, if you open yourself up to it, if you let it ask its questions and claw through the gloom for answers, what you'll find is a beautiful, introspective, unsettling horror experience where its most frightening parts aren't found in shambling robotic corpses, but in something more existential. The soul is dead, and SOMA killed it. It takes classic questions like, what is the soul and what is consciousness, and remolds it with black, gloopy gel to add challenging caveats and dread-inducing philosophical threads. It's beloved by some of its fans because it asks big questions, TM, but I think even that praise is unfair to it. Because video games are still so infant compared to other forms of art, I find that when a game like SOMA comes along, we're inclined to just gush about it because its story asks big questions. And some of the praises levied at the game forget to add that the way it asks its questions is what makes it so impressive. So, a couple of caveats before we begin. Number 1. I'm going to be spoiling SOMA from the offset. Please go and play it before watching this video. It's one of my favourite games of all time. Number 2. While we're going to look at gameplay, environmental storytelling, monster design, and all of that good video game horror stuff, the main focus will be on SOMA's story and waxing philosophy as we try to unpick its questions. If you enjoyed my Bioshock critiques or my Forgotten City critique, I think you'll feel right at home here. I'll be drawing from a lot of external sources and discussing philosophers like John Locke and Derek Parfit, because I think one philosopher specifically was a real influence on the game's message, and that message fucked me up in all kinds of ways. So, drink your tracer fluid and settle into your pilot seat. This is a commentary, critique and philosophical analysis of SOMA. I am of the firm belief SOMA's story would be less effective as a film, book, or TV show. Through dint of being passive mediums, I think a few things would be lost in translation. The choice system is the bedrock of its creeping unease. All of the clever cinematography in the world wouldn't be able to live up to confronting the terrifying acres in Station Theta. But one of SOMA's most impressive feats is in how it conditions the player to be curious, embrace a feeling of agency, and harbour tension. This conditioning is almost immediate.
Are you okay, Simon? I think you're bleeding.
Oh, that's nothing. It's just my brain can't stop bleeding from the accident.
Here, take this.
No, that's for later, for the scan.
It's green.
Ashley, I need to tell you something.
Simon, please don't make this weird.
Simon Jarrett wakes in a cold sweat. The year is 2015. He's just dreamed of the moment when he and his friend Ashley were hit by a car. Ashley, died. Simon was left with a terminal brain injury, and today he's going to have an experimental brain scan that might just save his life. When people talk and discuss and debate SOMA online, they talk about the big choices the game confronts you with. The last human, destroying the WoW, killing Simon 3, but our prologue in Simon's apartment actually offers up 3 choices before the brain scan even happens. Do we answer the call from David Munshi? Do we respond to an email from our work colleague Jesse? Do we ignore him when he later rings us up? They're tiny beats and entirely inconsequential when Simon wakes up on Pathos 2, but the overarching reasons for this remain the same. The first is to tutorialize that our choices do have consequences. Simon's conversation with Jesse changes depending on if we send him an email about opening up their shop. Our first act of gameplay is looking at an unknown number and deciding if Simon should answer it. From the get-go, we're being conditioned to infuse the game world with our agency and to think about the actions we're taking. Whether you answer the phone or not, you'll justify the decision to yourself. It's an unknown number, it's probably someone selling me NFTs, I'm not answering that. And this will have a natural snowball effect the further into the game we go. While the choices Simon makes in his apartment don't matter, the fact we are making choices does, and it's all part of SOMA's design philosophy. I know we're well in the weeds here, overthinking the first 10 minutes and all, but don't just take my word for it. Earlier this year, Frictional's creative director Thomas Grip had an interview with the site 80 Level. In it, he was asked about the studio's history and what key things they always considered when crafting a game. Quote, "The most interesting play comes when the players are not really playing, forming a plan, hiding, thinking about something they've seen, and so forth. These are often the key moments in a game, and they are all in the player's mind." But that's not the only point to all of this. Our time in the apartment is here to teach us about moving around, tutorializing the game physics, sure, but it's also to get a sense of who Simon is. This is important because he's not a silent protagonist. He's a thinking, feeling person with thoughts, memories, and a history. If Da Vinci was here, he'd probably want to poke around in Simon's damaged brain, but he would also absolutely argue that this is a guy with a soul. He's coated in guilt after the car accident. He has nightmares. His relationship to Ashley isn't one note, it's hinted there was something more there, a depth of feeling that the game leaves unsaid. His apartment is an environmental storytelling toy box, full of award statues, posters, movies, books, but it's also a disaster. Old pizza boxes, bottles, unwashed clothes, bloody rags from his head injury. He's not well. We need to believe that Simon is real, that he matters in the game world, because so much of the emotional conflict comes from the situations and decision making that he will later deal with, and the game purposefully adds lines here early on to reinforce that he is a real person, not just a stand-in for the player. When he drinks the tracer fluid needed before the brain scan, he comments on the taste, saying that it's texture like milk, but it tastes like sucking on a penny. We are invited to think about his physical body, his senses, and how he sees, tastes, touches the world around him.
Oh, hi. Didn't hear you come in. Simon Jarrett, right?
Meeting Dr. Munchi.
Well, it's just Mr. Munchi.
Whoops, sorry, Mr. Munchi. Simon settles in for his brain scan. The procedure sounds simple enough. He's going to copy our brain, build a digital model of it, and bombard it with stimuli, basically trying a million virtual treatments to Simon's brain until he finds the one that will help his physical brain. It's revolutionary, it's groundbreaking, it sounds a little too good to be true, but honestly, I'm not a scientist, so have at it, buddy.
Say cheese.
In a flash of light, David Munchi is gone. The dimness of his office has changed now to something darker. Simon looks at his hands and sees that they're clad in what seems to be a black diving suit. Somehow, some way, he's been transported to a facility in the future called Pathos 2. What happened here? There are a few tricks SOMA leans on to unnerve a player and invoke anxiety and tension. For all of the metallic shrieking sprinkled throughout, it's actually a surprisingly quiet game. Most of your time will be spent creeping through empty, clanking tunnels and pre-empting threats rather than facing them head on. There are variations in how responsive Pathos 2 is, where the game actively regulates its tension by taking moments that could be quick, like a door opening, and stretching them out to be achingly long. The station is old and creaky, so it makes sense doors would take a second to respond to our inputs. There's a section later where Simon is on his way to Station Lambda, and a ladder takes just a beat too long to descend, so there's a moment where the player feels lost, wondering what they're going to do. Moments like these return a few times, but there's always variation so it doesn't become too predictable. Before Simon even gets to Pathos 2, we're forced into an unsettling sequence in David Munchie's office. It's abandoned. There are frantic notes by Munchie asking where his partner has gone. Some of the vents are wide open and parts of the ceiling are falling apart, as if something ravaged this space. In reality, that's not the case at all. It's just a rundown office building that Munchie's renting for cheap rates. But setting up this seemingly normal space as ominous makes the heightened reveal of Pathos 2 even more creepy. The player is already primed to look out for potential secret threats before we even hear a monster. And best of all, SOMA keeps that priming going for a further half hour before our first creature, the Universal Helper, says hello. We see the carnage it inflicts when it tears through some metal doors. We hear it creeping around on the level above and are forced to backtrack after we get the Omni tool, so a familiar space we've learned becomes unfamiliar and terrifying because the game convinces us there's a monster down here now. Tutorial messages pop up to tell us we can crouch to be quieter and avoid detection, even though it's not an active threat yet. You can blunder around the opening all you like, noise won't currently get you killed. Static flickers on screen, a sign the game uses to warn us baddies are nearby, but in this case, the monster will never attack us this early on. The user interface is actively tricking the player into thinking they're in danger, when in reality, this is a safe tutorial space that's teaching us how the Omni tool works and acclimating the player to the atmosphere of Pathos 2.
Hey you, can you talk? Can you talk like the others? Why are you like this?
Our search for answers reinforces all of that conditioning. The tension comes from the lighting, the blood on the floor, the absence of people, but it's also strengthened by the information we collect and how every snippet of truth just leads to more questions. We learn that we're on Site Upsilon, a geothermal power plant. There's lots of different sites, Theta, Lambda, and so on, but a pre-recorded message tells us that the sites didn't really share much about the work they were individually doing. For example, a security operative, John Strohmeyer, says that he doesn't know what the people at Site Omicron were working on. What is all of this for? We learn that pilot seats were used by the staff to control robots, but they were deactivated. Why? Our first exposure to the history of the facility is when Simon mysteriously taps into a memory connected to a Universal Helper robot hanging in a containment chamber. We hear someone ask them if they can talk, like the others. Did the robots become sentient? We learned that Pathos 2 is underwater. We're not in space, like most players will first assume, considering the environmental design plays off of classic space station tropes. Why was Pathos 2 built in the first place? Getting the Omni tool also gives us our first corpse, sitting eerily at the side of the room with these strange black tentacles tightening around it and crusting over it. Whoever this was, they're missing their head. What are the tentacles? And where did the head go? We'll stumble across our first WoW pod, these strange growths that heal Simon if he's injured, long before anything could possibly hurt him. So if we touch it, we don't learn what the benefits are. Mechanically, this is the opposite of half-decent tutorialization, but horror games benefit from obfuscation, from not being too clear in their gameplay, so it just adds to the sense of confusion and isolation that is so key for setting the player up to be terrified. If this was, say, The Evil Within or Resident Evil Village, or to use a more appropriate example, Alien Isolation, all of this tension would compound in a scripted, drooling, bloodthirsty encounter with a monster. In Resi, Ethan gets his fingers chewed off. In The Evil Within, there's an on-rails chase from the sadist. In Alien, we get up close and personal with the xenomorph so we can appreciate their threat. But Soma's first introduction to his creatures, the climax of all of this work, is much sadder. We find a robot called a Mockingbird plugged into a console. It's draining the electricity, and if we want to access that console, we need to unplug it. Simon doesn't say a word. He doesn't mutter to himself, I better turn that console on. It's left entirely up to the player to look at this scene and realize entirely on their own that they need to unplug the robot. No problem, right? Easy peasy. Let me just pull this cord out and... What was that? Did it just speak? Probably my imagination. Oh, that didn't feel good at all. It's entirely up to you if this act made you feel guilty or not, but whether it did or didn't, the game wants you to justify unplugging the robot. In a meta sense, you could just say that it's the only way to progress. There's no way to carry on with the story and keep this robot alive. And in fact, it's the only moment in the game where it looks like the player has a choice, when in reality they don't. But I think that justification is kinda uninteresting, considering all of the work SOMA has done over the past hour to immerse you. Simon will always unplug the robot. We've killed something that seemed to have thoughts and feelings. The game wants you to consider how you feel about that. The placing of this moment is explicit. We still haven't met a monster yet, but everything the environmental storytelling is teaching us leads to the conclusion that the robots are probably the problem here. And after all, they're just a robot. It's not like we killed a person, right? It claimed it was happy just siphoning energy from the console. Is this really a quality of life we should be concerned with preserving? Bear this in mind, by the way, sanctity of life versus quality of life comes back again and again. There's lots of ways a player can shake off any potential guilt this early on. And it's easy to shake off when a friendly human voice pops up on the console.
Hello, is there anyone there?
Hey, can you hear me?
This is Catherine, our voice in the ear that will guide Simon on his wet, squelchy, metallic adventure. She's based at Site Lambda, and for now, the two of them can't communicate. If we want to get some real answers, Simon has to get to the comm center. Catherine, aside from being utterly fascinating, also embodies one of the ways SOMA conditions fear. Her inclusion breeds a sense of isolation. She can only speak to us when we plug the Omni tool into a control panel, so there are long stretches of time where we have nothing. No friends, no guidance. She's not always in our ear like, say, Atlas in Bioshock, keeping us motivated with a friendly Irish jingle. Especially later in the game, we can go up to a full hour without her if we're exploring thoroughly, meaning we have more time left with our thoughts, questions, and curiosities, as well as being very much alone when facing monsters. There's a distinct sense of security and safety whenever Catherine pops up on a console because the spaces are usually well lit and our conversations are never interrupted by a gnarly, screaming thing. It means there's an ebb and flow to the horror, similar to how, say, a safe room is used in Resident Evil. The irony in all this is that SOMA wasn't always a horror game, at least in the conceptual phase. In an interview with Engadget, one of the programmers, Ian Thomas, said, quote, "I think there was a phase in really early development when they weren't even sure that it was going to be a horror at all. They knew the story they wanted to tell, but was it going to be in a horror framework? Then I think it just came back to, that's what the company does." Frictional does horror well. The Dark Descent spawned thousands of clones. The Bunker has been a surprise hit in a year dominated by popular horror experiences. Unpredictability are those games' greatest assets, and SOMA is no different. To be frank, I find the Dark Descent sanity system obnoxious rather than truly terrifying, but the fact it's not just in-game threats that trigger it means it never becomes a predictable signal that there's a monster nearby. SOMA does the same thing. The chromatic aberration that triggers when we look at an enemy will also trigger randomly, haphazardly, or when Simon gets too close to a powerful part of the WoW artificial intelligence. And what this means is it's a horror game that never announces the frights to you, my #1 rule when assessing the effectiveness of a horror title. This philosophy leaks through in other places as well. Sometimes, without announcement, parts of Pathos 2 will just change. For example, when we explore Theta, we see this door with what looks like blood pooling underneath it. When we return to the door later, it's now ajar. We didn't hear a monster rip out of here. Maybe a monster didn't do this. Maybe the lock on the door just deactivated, but it's more than enough to put a chill in our step. Or what about here when we're investigating the quarters of the chief factor Terry Akers? All of the shrieking, bloodthirsty creatures in the world can't hold a candle to the tension that builds when we can't open a locker with blood leaking out of its vent. Good visual disturbances like this will often lead to unanswerable questions. Why is blood coming out of this locker? Why is it locked? We'll look at a few more examples as we work through the game, but what I really want to hammer home here at the start is that SOMA doesn't just condition fear in its opening, it constantly returns to these tactics again and again as the game progresses, meaning when it bursts open and puts Simon's life in danger, the threat, the panic, the catharsis that good horror gives us explodes, coating the game in black, sticky terror.
Have you figured out what's going on yet?
Me? I was hoping you'd have some answers.
I probably have some. What do you want to know?
Where do you even begin? I mean, what is this place? How did I get here? And why do the robots talk like they're people?
Well, you're at Upsilon, clearly.
Simon Jarrett, meet Just Catherine. She tells us that the year is 2104. A comet called Talos hit Earth and wiped out all life on the surface of the planet. Pathos 2 contained the last of humanity, but an artificial intelligence called the WoW that was set up to keep everyone alive has gotten out of control. It is keeping people alive, but it's using a substance called structure gel to do so, and it's completely transforming people and robots, turning some of them into crazy, deranged monsters. So, as Cytopsilon falls apart and Simon is blasted into the deep, dark vastness of the ocean, we're going to look at those monsters. But first, let's jump back about 15 minutes, because there's someone I've failed to mention. We need to talk about Carl. In 1962, the neuroscientists David Hubel and Torsten Wiesel published a study on the relationship between the eyes and the brain. Their work inspired something called binocular disparity theory. This is the idea that there is a disparity between the information our eyes send to the brain and how our brain interprets that information. Imagine you look through a pair of binoculars, and the left binocular shows a chair, and the right binocular shows a house. When you do this, your brain doesn't merge the chair and the house into one image and create some crazy chair-house hybrid, despite the fact both eyes are connected, so that hybrid technically should be all we see. The brain is smarter than that in how it interprets the information the eyes send over. No, the signals from each eye are sent separately, and your brain is able to understand that the left binocular shows a chair and the right binocular shows a house. Basically, what Hubel and Wiesel's work proved was that the stuff we see in the physical world is not always the same as how our brain interprets it. What does this have to do with SOMA? Well, meet Carl Semken.
What are you?
Are you blind? It's me. Carl Semken. Wrangler? Any of this sound familiar to you?
No, actually.
Well, thanks for being so helpful. It's not like I'm knocked out on the floor or anything.
To get access to the communications tower, Simon needs to turn on some power to unlock a door, but unfortunately this robot, claiming his name is Carl, is blocking the power cable. He's trapped under a machine, and the player is given a choice. Either we siphon the power through Carl, which will electrocute him and leave him in a constant state of pain, or we divert the power away from him, which will kill him completely. So, what do you do? Talking to Carl, we see an extreme version of binocular disparity theory. He doesn't think he's a robot. He thinks he's a human man. He even looks down at his metal parts and waves what he thinks are hands at us. He seems to be experiencing a strong sense of discomfort because he's trapped, and if we do electrocute him, he screams at the top of his lungs in a really disturbing way. Despite the fact his robot body doesn't have nerve endings, he is experiencing pain. There's clearly a separation between Carl's senses and what his brain is telling him. But he's not living in a dreamland. Carl is very aware of the room he's in, of Simon's presence. In fact, to spoil a later reveal, Carl is able to tell that Simon doesn't look human himself. We're just robot parts glued into a diving suit, and Carl comments on this. He still has memories. He references colleagues like Amy Azaro. For all intents and purposes, Carl behaves, thinks and feels the same way a human being would. He just doesn't think he has a robot body. Carl tells us that his last memory was being in a pilot seat, controlling a universal helper, the robot we're speaking to right now. Your mind is pretty tightly wired to the robot, he says. We later learn that when you're plugged into a pilot seat, you detach your brain from your physical body. Your memory keeps you from going insane. There's still a conscious awareness that you are sitting in a chair controlling a robot rather than becoming a robot, but that sensory input is numbed, so your focus is on the robot itself. The pilot seat is in the right binocular, the robot is in the left.
Anyway, I was just dealing with some heat shields and that's my last clear memory.
At first glance, it seems like Carl, just like the robot from the console earlier, has become sentient, believing itself to be the real Carl Semken. But that's silly, right? Maybe Carl must be stuck in a pilot seat somewhere and somehow he's feeling all of the pain of this universal helper. Something's gone wrong in his mind's connection to the robot, so now he thinks he is the robot, right? But in minutes that theory is banished. The real Carl Semken, the human Carl, is dead. We find his body slumped up against the wall. A name tag confirms his identity. All that's left is this robot claiming that he's Carl. Somehow, this robot, just like all of the robots on the station, has downloaded the entire mind of a human being. So, what do? We either need to put this robot in a perpetual state of pain, possibly for hundreds of years until the power goes out, or we kill it. Well, there's a third option. If we electrocute Carl and his screaming makes us immediately regret it, we can stop shocking him. But if you wait too long, you'll put him into a vegetative state. Not dead, not in eternal pain, but he's what today's medicine would diagnose as minimally conscious. I've been using, and will continue to use, phrases like the soul, the self, and consciousness interchangeably as the video goes on. Whether that's right or wrong is for you to decide, but it helps keep us all on the same page as I raise various philosophers, neuroscientists, psychologists, and the like. In this context, they all mean basically the same thing. Who we are, not what we are. So with that in mind, does Carl Semken have a self, a soul, or a consciousness in this vegetative state? Let's jump back to 2003 and the philosopher Robert Pasno, because what he says is really interesting. Quote, "A human being goes out of existence before all life comes to an end. In that case, the rational soul would give way to a merely sensory soul, or even to a merely nutritive soul." He's building off of the works of St. Thomas Aquinas here, but remoulding it for a modern audience. The soul goes through 3 stages, he says. Rational, which is probably what you're experiencing right now. You're listening to this video and your rational brain is adding context, opinions, and personal thoughts, and you might eventually even turn that into action, such as liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Then there's the sensory soul, where you are taking in the world, but your brain isn't doing anything with that information yet. Think a baby when it's born. Light is bright. It has an instinctual reaction to it, so it cries. But there's no rational thought behind, light, and I will cry to make it stop. And then the vegetative soul. This is where someone is in a coma or minimal consciousness. Your soul is basically just a life force, keeping you alive. You could say that Carl Semken is in that latter stage. But is that the case, really?
Hey. Hello?
Because it's not Carl's consciousness that's keeping him alive. It's the WoW, this artificial intelligence that's keeping his robot body powered up, despite the electricity we just fried him with. Carl's brain, his motherboard, his circuitry has nothing to do with keeping him alive. So if Carl doesn't have a vegetative soul, and he definitely doesn't have a rational or sensory soul, what's left? Does he have a soul? No, really, does he? I don't know. Our answer, strangely, might come in the form of tennis. In 2010, Dr. Adrian Owen conducted an experiment on a man who had been in a coma for 7 years following a car accident. He was trying to find a way to communicate with him. We've all heard the stories of people with brain injuries who can blink once for yes and twice for no, but the damage was so severe that not even that was possible. Owen devised a technique to enable the man to answer yes and no to simple questions through the use of a high-tech scanner, monitoring his brain activity. To answer yes, he was told to imagine playing tennis, a motor activity. To answer no, he was told to think of wandering from room to room in his home, visualizing everything he would expect to see there, creating activity in the part of the brain governing spatial awareness and memory. This worked completely. The man was able to answer questions about his family, he was able to imagine playing tennis. Quite literally, the parts of his brain that focused on memory and imagination lit up on the scanner like a Christmas tree. This is the kind of soul that Robert Pasno failed to consider, and while we don't know for certain if Carl Semken can still imagine anything or remember anything in his vegetative state, we do know that robots like him are capable of those things. Simon and Catherine are just like Carl, and they dream and imagine quite a lot in the second half of the game. Regardless of the implications on the soul, SOMA is once again asking us to consider the sanctity of life versus quality of life. As far as we know, this is the last version of Carl Semken. The human version died, so now there's a trapped robotic version. Is a life in pain a life worth living? Is a life comatose a life worth living? Every time I play the game, I do something different. For this playthrough, I turned off the power. People don't give enough credit to SOMA's monsters. Yeah, I said it. I think these are some of the most interesting enemy designs Frictional have ever created, and I'm including the horrifying Clarence from Penumbra Black Plague in that. They encapsulate the game's theme of body versus soul in a way that I think is easily missed when we're creeping around them or hiding behind desks. But the way they evolve over the span of the game is, to be frank, fucking awesome.
No, not you too. I was really hoping you were human.
Don't let the circuitry fool you. I was human once.
Setback after setback spurs on Simon's journey beneath the sea. He's blasted into the abyss of the ocean, finds a shuttle that can take him to Station Lambda. That shuttle then crashes. Seriously, the guy can't catch a break. But eventually he makes it to where Catherine is waiting for us. She's a robot too, just like Carl was. But strangely, she seems to be aware of that fact and is kinda cold to Simon if he tells her he killed Carl. Don't worry, she says. It was just a robot. Catherine experiences states of being and not being. Her consciousness pauses when Simon uploads her to the Omni tool, but she retains all of her memories every time. So what she gets is a kind of continuation that keeps stuttering and going dark. Simon takes the Cortex chip that holds her consciousness out of the robot and plugs it into the Omni tool so she can come with us. He doesn't copy Catherine's soul, he quite literally moves it, like taking someone's brain and physically attaching it to a new body. She doesn't seem to mind, she embraces her newfound existence clinically. This is just the way things are. All she cares about is her project, the ARK. The ARK is a digital world, holding the brain scans of almost everyone who worked on Pathos 2. The plan is to load it into a railgun and shoot it into space where the power of the sun will keep it powered on for thousands of years. It's a digital afterlife, a matrix. So our goal is simple. Find the ARK, upload Simon and Catherine to it, and shoot it into space. Eternity among the stars. Humanity's last hope, seeing as Pathos 2 is a robotic hellscape. Also, Catherine all but states that Simon is just a brain scan in a robot body, but Simon still doesn't seem to understand. I get that a lot of players might be annoyed at Simon for not wrapping his head around the game's core concept straight away, but honestly I find his idiocy kind of endearing, and the fact he doesn't fully understand that A, he's in a robot body, and B, that he's a copy of the original Simon rather than a continuation of him, makes those later reveals feel way more emotional than if he figured it all out so early on. Again, this is a story about Simon. He's not just a vessel for the player, and being one step ahead of him doesn't necessarily diminish the power of the game's more harrowing questions. If anything, I think it adds a lot of pity and sympathy because we know a dark truth that he doesn't.
I found it. It's at a site named Tau.
Oh, no, it's on Earth. It's so close to 5, they almost made it. Damn it, it won't make it for long in that state. A couple of decades at most. That's not much to build a future.
If we got to it, could we get on the ARK?
For the next hour of play, Simon is stalked by SOMA's second monster, the Flesher. It's more humanoid than the universal helper we encountered at Site Upsilon. That thing was more like a T-Rex with its tiny wiggling arms and thick clomping legs. When it spoke, it was speaking a heavily reconstructed English. It swore, it muttered things like, "It's not your fault," and when it chased Simon, it yelled, "Feast your eyes." Most players won't be able to pull apart this phraseology though, purely because of how heavily garbled it is. We only know what it's saying because of the game files. It's creepy, sure, but it looks like rainbow and glitter compared to the Flesher. The Flesher is a naked person. It's not a maddened robot. It's a walking, breathing being that's been driven insane by how the WoW has altered its body. It doesn't talk, it just breathes, raspily, and its face has been overtaken by growths of structure gel, blue lights winking when we first see it in the gloom of the ocean. Eye contact is what sets it off. If you hide at the other side of a room and don't look at it, the Flesher will likely march off in the other direction. The fear and paranoia comes from the fact you can't see where it is if you're following this strategy, and the level design where we confront it doesn't make this any easier on your heart rate because it's a lot of tightly packed, claustrophobic rooms and corridors where it can be slowly, quietly stalking us. But not every humanoid monster is like the Flesher. At Site Omicron, we meet this thing, affectionately called Robot Head by the fanbase. We don't know exactly who this was, but it was probably the scientist Lisa Cameron who studied structure gel and learned the WoW had been modifying it for something. Whoever it was, Robot Head is a woman's corpse, but the eyes, mouth, nose, the entire inside of its head has been replaced with structure gel, lighting up the holes in her face whenever she becomes hostile. She speaks, but always the same sort of dialogue, telling us to go, to get away, to leave her alone. It's only when Simon gets too close enough that she might identify him as a threat, that she attacks with maddeningly ferocious speed. Robot Head seems to mourn her previous life, the life before the WoW transformed her. Does she have a memory of a life before, or does she not realize what she's become? Some of the robots that glide along the ocean floor, like this scavenger, are also mad, but seem to exhibit a state of self-awareness. This little guy knows that he's a brain scan in a robot body. He also knows he needs structure gel to survive. If Simon gets too close, he barks that we shouldn't be greedy and tries to suck it out of us. In direct contrast to this, there's a scavenger later that has the brain scan of a scientist called Javid Goya. He isn't aware that he's a brain scan. In fact, Javid seems to think that he's human, and he ignores Simon completely. He'll speak to his colleagues even though they're not there, rapidly changing the subject from debating manners around women to grumbling about the amount of work he has to do. He's clearly deranged, but he's not in a rabid, manic state like the mysterious scavenger who's hunting for structure gel. It's as if self-awareness makes the minds of these robots implode. The philosopher René Descartes has the famous phrase, "I think, therefore I am." This statement meant a few things when he wrote it. It was all part of his attempts to find one statement which was beyond doubt, and while I think it's rational and solid, the more Descartes talks, the less rational he sounds, eventually just throwing his hands into the air and saying, "Because God, you dickhead!" But today, modern philosophy has translated it. To think we're self-aware means that we are self-aware. But is that true when looking at these two scavengers? The first scavenger is self-aware. He knows he's a robot. He knows his physical situation, but he flies into a mindless rage whenever we get too close. We later learn that the brain scans become incredibly hostile when faced with their human counterparts. They accuse the humans of being a copy, and it melts them. Javid Goya, the scavenger that isn't self-aware, that's lost in a daze talking to his colleagues, is able to tap into his memories, conversations that he's had. Which of these creatures has pure consciousness, a soul? Or in fact, am I asking the wrong question? The neuroscientist Anil Seth, in his brilliant book Being You, A New Science of Consciousness, would say that I am asking the wrong questions. Quote, "Is consciousness all or none? Either the lights are on or they aren't." This question is alluring, but I think it's misguided. I prefer to think of consciousness in terms of sharpish transitions from the total absence of consciousness to the presence of at least some conscious experience. Conscious experience then manifests in different degrees. Take an adult woman. Is she more conscious when dreaming than she is sitting at her desk, lost in a daze after a heavy lunch? Are the lights on or off? Anil Seth argues that consciousness is more like a dimmer switch. Maybe all of these beings, even the disgusting flesher, are conscious, soulful, and in some ways self-aware. Javid Goya is lost in a hallucinatory world while he's calm. The scavenger enters a hallucinatory world when he's rageful. Both, arguably, have a light that is always dimly glowing.
Why are you making me do this? We're in a share, for fuck's sakes!
Let's move away from all the neuroscience stuff and just focus on the grisly designs. Barnacles, crustaceans, and rust go a long way in adding how gross everything is. It might just be because of my deep-seated fear of the ocean, which we will get to, but there's something visually disturbing about all of this stuff. They look like scabbed growths, simultaneously growing out of something and parasitically latching to it, draining it of life. In reality, none of this is true. Barnacles don't eat whatever they stick to, but their mindlessness and their ability to be everywhere in SOMA doesn't do them any favors. They take the physical shape of the robots and creatures they're glued to and make them rough, knobby, even more disfigured than they already are with the structure gel, making the geometry of these beings unfamiliar and unsettling. But because we see traces of the real, natural world in all the oceanic imagery, it makes these creatures recognizable and more believable, adding to the horror. There's a constant, consistent sense in SOMA that everything is alive, whether they're sentient or not. Later, in Station Tau, we'll come across a corpse with some hardened structure gel slowly transforming the body, but because of the shape of the gel and the hard casing, it looks like a gigantic sea insect is devouring its prey. The tentacular presentation of the structure gel, combined with the knowledge that it's all just an extension of the WoW by this point, makes Pathos 2 consistently feel like we're wandering around inside a gigantic organism, rather than an underwater facility that's got black gunk on the walls. And any fear we previously had of the structure gel is solidified when we meet Terry Akers.
Terry Akers, chief factor at Delta, first running today. We're at 60, 52,000.
ARKHAM, it seems, shared Da Vinci's belief that the eyes are the window to the soul because he cut his out so he could become one with the WoW. He attacked and murdered his colleagues and then injected them with structure gel so the WoW could take over their bodies and bring them back as monstrosities. He believed that the WoW was the only thing that could keep everyone alive after the comet hit Earth. Technically, he was right, at least as far as our physical bodies are concerned. He himself drank structure gel, which is why his body seems more leathery and fleshy than creatures like the robot head. But because the structure gel's job was to repair machinery, it got absorbed by his cells, leading to it trying to improve his body, growing an extra arm, expanding his mass. When ARKHAM was eventually brought in by Pathos 2's scientists, they did scans of his brain and they seemed to theorize that something was remotely controlling parts of his occipital lobe and parietal lobe, the parts of the brain that focus on sensory perception and starts to integrate that perception with reason. Was the WoW sending visual signals to his brain that made him see the world in a particular way? The answer is probably yes. That's evidenced to us when ARKHAM eventually captures Simon and plugs him into the structure gel. We get lost in a dreamlike haze where Simon is back in his apartment, as if the WoW is warping his memories and his perception to see the world in a completely different way, like it's created a simulated environment to keep Simon passive.
You don't want me?
Yes, of course, but what happened?
You fell in love.
I've seen takes that SOMA would be a better game without its monsters, and I cannot disagree more. Writing for CG Magazine, William Dixon said, quote, "SOMA immediately dropped the ball the second I caught sight of the first monster. Despite large chunks of time in between enemy encounters, it didn't help with the pacing of the game. The enemies didn't add to any kind of rising action, they simply sat in my way, usually in some poorly designed network of hallways, and eliminating them altogether was done in such a limp-handed way." The pacing and variety of SOMA's monsters adds spades of context to the game's central horror focus. The world is uninhabitable now. We can't just start a new civilization on Pathos 2. Humanity as we know it is dead. Monsters roam the halls. There's no coming back from this. Fearing creatures like ARKHAM or pitying creatures like the Scavenger complement how we feel about its moral choices and its central questions around what we quantify as a soul and what quality of life is worth living. When we encounter the Flesher, it absolutely does not just sit in our way. We get stuck in a labyrinth of numerous floors. It gives us a scripted whack, so Simon will die from a one-hit kill to up the tension, and we need to learn the space if we're going to escape from it alive. The intense sequence with Terry Akers forces us to rely entirely on sound because his hearing is so acute. In fact, we can find an office room that's soundproofed, which, when entering it, changes how Akers has been programmed to behave, designating him with the code bad hearing. .exe. As someone who generally prefers horror where I can defend myself, I honestly do not think SOMA needed to arm Simon with a weapon to eliminate the creatures. Would it be cool if we had a weapon like in Amnesia the Bunker that doesn't kill the beast but slows it down and scares it off? Maybe, but having something like that would give me game-isms to be distracted by. I'm sure I'd enjoy them, but any second spent thinking about resource management, or bullets, or combat is a second where I'm not thinking about Pathos 2, or the story, or whether this infinite cosmic existence is really all there is, whether or not a robot of me with a copy of my brain has more of a right to exist than I do. Jesus Christ, existence is terrifying. How does anyone get through a day without losing their mind over the nature of the soul? Sorry, what were we talking about?
Care to point me in the direction of the closest tool chip storage?
I think it would be easier to just take one from a robot.
What? Just knock a robot over the head and steal their chips?
The toolbox over there says it has a stun baton. You could use that.
Come on, I don't want to hurt anyone.
So, speaking of moral choices, to get to our next destination, Site Theta, Simon needs to take an underwater Zeppelin, but we can't summon the Zeppelin without a new Cortex chip. Thankfully, there are two ripe candidates. Javid Goya, that scavenger bot that's chatting happily to his imaginary friends, and a K8 unit, a tiny orb-shaped bot that's been helping us out this whole time, opening doors and happily bleeping and blooping away. K8 isn't human at all. It's just an artificial intelligence, a robot programmed to help Simon out by opening doors. To get the Cortex chip, We've got to kill one of them. This choice focuses less on philosophical implications. Javid Goy is a person's mind in a robot body, but we don't have any relationship with him. We do have a relationship with K8, but that's just an artificial intelligence. I compare it to a pet dog, but to be honest, a pet dog has more of a self and right to life than the K8 unit. In the words of Dr. Rita Lenke, dogs have more consciousness than we give them credit for. Quote, "Although dogs can't identify themselves in the mirror, our study learned that they still have some level of self-awareness and ace other self-recognition tests. They can recognize their own odor and recall memories of specific events." Killing K8 hurts because we personify her through the fact she's helped us and the sounds she makes are cute. I'm doing it right now by referring to her as her rather than it, but I don't think anyone can justifiably say K8 has more of a right to keep living than Javid Goya. If we do kill Javid, the K8 unit runs away from us. So not only are we left with the guilt of ending the life of a person, but scaring the thing we were trying to save. Was I wrong to think it wasn't conscious? After all, it recognized danger and ran away from us. But then I'd argue that's just its programming. These bots were created to roam the sea floor. They likely were programmed with threat indicators so they'd stay away from sharks or anglerfish that might damage them. But then, isn't this something we have in common with them? Our own personal threat indicators are just biological programming that keeps us alive. Did I make the wrong choice?
It's just a robot, Simon.
Oh, shut up, Catherine. Outside our next stop, Station Theta, we find another Mockingbird robot. This one is trapped under some rubble. It's being kept alive by the WOW. Structure gel is powering it up.
Hello?
Who is that? Mark?
No, we haven't met before.
Is this Mark?
Her name is Robin Bass. She doesn't understand. She thinks she's on the Ark, but in fact she's stuck in a robot body under the ocean. She doesn't get the simulated utopia Catherine has programmed. She tells us that she undertook the brain scan and killed herself, believing in something called the continuity theory. This was the idea that if you killed yourself just as the brain scan completed, you wouldn't die. Instead, you just lose your physical body, but your mind would pick up where it left off inside the Ark. In a sense, your soul would just transport itself onto the Ark. In reality, that didn't happen. Robin 1 died during the brain scan. Her existence ended. What we're speaking to is a copy of Robin, Robin 2. However, Robin 2 doesn't know that. From her perspective, she closed her eyes during the brain scan and opened them up in the Ark. It's just the Ark's reality looks like the bottom of the sea. Simon's moral dilemma is simple. Do we kill Robin Bass, unplug her from the WOW, or do we move on and do nothing, dooming her to 1,000 years alone, sitting here on the bottom of the ocean, calmly believing all of this is the Ark? So, first of all, is the continuity theory worth putting any stock into? The short answer is no. The long answer is hell no. What were they thinking? In the world of SOMA, Robin Bass is living proof. She says she can't remember killing herself, but is pretty certain that's what happened, meaning Robin 1 experienced those quick seconds between the brain scan being complete and her suicide. But this Robin, Robin 2, didn't. That part wasn't continued over. A tiny ball of light didn't leave her body and jump into the Ark. Robin 1 and Robin 2 have two different conscious experiences. There is no continuation. But in the world of philosophy and neuroscience, well, the answers vary. This guy, Dr. Sam Parnia, has studied what happens to consciousness after death and has come to the conclusion that consciousness is channeled by the brain, but it's an independent entity all its own. Quote, "Millions of people have died on a hospital bed and then come back to life after being resuscitated," he said, and many of them have reported these very lucid, well-structured thought processes. They're able to form memories, describe conversations and what people were wearing, except that their brain is shut down and they've gone through death. Which is completely a paradox. It should not happen. If your mind is simply a byproduct of your brain, if your brain has shut down, there should be no consciousness. So, taking that, we could say that the continuity theory has some merit. Lots of people die and experience visions, or even describe looking down on themselves, watching doctors and nurses try to bring them back. So maybe the soul is an independent entity. Maybe I'm gonna fly up to heaven, get my wings and have a beer with Jesus. Hooray! But remember Adrian Owen, the tennis house guy? He completely disagreed with Parnia, claiming he was dog whistling to religious people in one of the more salty responses I found while researching this video. Quote, The brain is the organ that produces consciousness, full stop. If you take that organ away, or kill that organ dies, you cannot be conscious. I don't believe patients who report near-death experiences get to a state where there's no detectable brain response whatsoever. If that were true, they would be classified as brain dead, and I know of no case of a brain dead person coming back. Fight, 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 fight. But regardless of continuation, we're faced with a similar predicament to when we met Carl Semken. Robin is in a sucky situation. Should we pull the plug?
Where is everyone? I thought there would be like 40 or 50 people here.
I don't know. I'll let you know if I see any.
Typically, sanctity of life arguments concentrate on the human angle. All human life is sacred. Nobody should end it before their time. But for the sake of ease, let's just say that Robin is human. She's a robot body with a reconstruction of an entire human consciousness inside, so it shouldn't be difficult. In 1993, the philosopher Ronald Dworkin wrote Life's Dominion, where he tried to justify a secular or non-religious view on the sanctity of life. He said that human life is sacred because of its natural investment and its creative investment. Natural investment is the idea that we can make babies, build relationships, etc. Creative investment is our output. Paintings, books, games, philosophical ideas, business strategies, streaming yourself silently watching someone else's hard work, I guess. Pretty much everything that we put back out into the world. If someone has or will have the capacity for either of these investments, their life is sacred and they shouldn't be euthanized. So, let's apply that to Robin Bass. She is trapped here. The way the structure gel has grown over her body has essentially glued her to the seabed, and she can't leave the whale's tentacle because it's all that's keeping her alive. She can't go anywhere to find friends and build relationships. She's a robot, so she can't have babies. Robin has no natural investment. This isn't like a human with minimal consciousness. Remember, Adrian Owen's patient was trapped to a hospital bed, but they could answer questions and build relationships with a tennis house experiment if people came to them. Physically, medical marvels are now finding that bone marrow could potentially be used to make babies, so the person in the hospital bed could technically create life and build a relationship with them through the high-tech scanner. Dworkin's theory doesn't detach people who can't reproduce. Robin Bass can't reproduce, but she might be able to still have natural investment. What if Java Goya swam over here and started a relationship with her? I see a lot of players consider the emptiness of Pathos 2 in their decision to kill Robin. There's nothing here for her. But the irony is that that mindset creates a destructive cycle. Let's kill Carl. There's nothing left for him down here. Let's kill Javid. There's nothing left for him down here. Let's kill Robin. There's nothing left for her down here because Simon Jarrett is busy massacring everyone. Every time we kill one of them, we are adding to the fact there's nothing left. We are removing the potential for companionship and life under the sea with each dark decision. As for creative investment, I don't think it needs to be some world-changing piece of art or anything. Robin could dream up a story while she's down here and share it with one of the other robots. I don't think the Flesher would care to listen, but hey, Simon stopped by to check on her. Who's to say that someone else won't? Pathos 2 might seem barren and lifeless, but we've seen plenty of evidence that there is life down here. It's just strange.
Pretty amazing, right? I mean, the Ark.
Yeah, it's great. Catherine and the guys have really pulled through. They saved us all.
But what about quality of life? SOMA tells us that the comet was an extinction event. Life on Earth has ceased to be, and we never get any information that suggests otherwise. Would you want to live on in that world? It's in fact a question my missus and I asked each other just last week before recording this video, when we watched M. Night Shyamalan's movie Knock at the Cabin. The premise there is that all human life would be wiped out unless you kill a loved one. Your partner or everything else. What do you choose? My answer then remains the same. I choose her over everything, every time. Life with her has a quality. She is the only thing that matters. I would kill you in a heartbeat. Get ready, I'm coming. But what if you were alone? What if you weren't wandering the earth with that special someone? What if you were Robin Bass? What is her quality of life? Well, that's in the eye of the beholder. This situation physically sucks, but Robin isn't hurt. She's not in distress like Carl Semken was. She seems calm. A little confused maybe, but calm and relatively happy. Right now she's in awe of what she's looking at. But how long will this all remain? How long until her creativity turns to madness, hallucinations? Maybe that's what happened to Java Goya. Maybe that's why he's mulling about, talking to colleagues who aren't there. If he is insane, he seems content. Hopefully, that's what will happen to Robin. I don't think I have any right to take that away from her.
We're here. Okay, great. Time to hijack ourselves a submarine. There will be nothing stopping us when we have done that.
You guys sure have a lot of machines and vehicles down here. What makes this one so special?
It's the only transport that can go into the abyss without cracking like a can of soup.
Simon and Catherine arrive at Station Theta. The Ark capsule is here, so the plan is to grab it, get in a submarine called the Dumbat, and swim over to the railgun to blast it into space. Theta was the main administration building, the primary living quarters, and a place of refuge for the crew who evacuated from Upsilon. It's also where Catherine conducted the brain scans and uploaded them to the Ark. Her work was primitive at first, but slowly the WoW started conducting its own brain scans on people who used the pilot seats, copying their consciousness to various robots around the station in an effort to keep humanity alive. A robot body is less likely to deteriorate than a human body. What exactly happened to the WoW to make it do this? Why did this new idea come into its programming? It's a mystery for now, but Catherine observed that the WoW's brain scans were perfect copies. Arguably too perfect. The WoW's first brain scan was the engineer Imogen Reed, and Catherine saw that Reed's scan was, quote, too real, she won't play nicely with the others. This forced a change in Catherine's experiments, and before long she was making better, perfect scans just like the WoW was. Complete 100% digital copies of people. Site Theta is my favourite part of the game. Not just because it has the best puzzle, or because it's where we meet Acres and that scared the shit out of me, but because the environmental storytelling is so rife here. It's powerful everywhere, but in Theta, every hallway, every room echoes with memories of the past, with the desires and anxieties of the workers. In 2013, Thomas Grip wrote a blog about the 5 foundational pillars of SOMA's design. Number 1, everything is story. Number 2, take the world seriously. Number 3, the player is in charge. Number 4, trust the player. And number 5, thematics emerge through play. I want to drill into number 2 here, take the world seriously. In Grip's own words, quote, every detail in an environment is connected to the story somehow. Nothing should be written off as simply a requirement for gameplay or exposition. For instance, if you find an audio log, you will be able to learn more about the story by pondering its placement alone. In Theta, the world is taken very seriously. Despite the fact the living quarters are architecturally identical, which makes sense because this is a clinical station of the future, every room is specifically tailored to replicate the feeling of the person who once lived in it.
Cool fan.
Thanks. Reminds me of Taipei, my hometown.
Catherine's room has a stuffed animal, pictures of her home, and she reminisces about them with traces of affection in her voice that we haven't heard before. This is the first time she hasn't been purely goal-oriented. This might be a digital copy of human Catherine's brain, but that copy is emotionally connected to physical objects in the material world. Her memory is informing her identity. We see that Guy Conrad was re-engineering a maser tool with a microwave emitter. He planned to fry his brain right after the scan. Robin Bass's room is full of pictures of the Ark's digital world that Catherine presumably printed out to show what was waiting for their digital selves. She's coloured around them, filled them up with childish drawings, almost obsessively. In just one shot, the game captures the state of mind Robin was in when she decided to end her life. In Mark Sarang's room, we find an audio diary where he talks about continuity theory. He was the guy who came up with it in the first place, who planted that idea, resulting in the unnecessary suicides of about a dozen people.
Did you know that the human body consists of up to 75 trillion individual cells? They typically don't stay with us till we die. Some live a few days, while others live a few years. Our conscious mind is not the pattern of our brain, but a continuous, emergent entity based on that pattern.
Fucking idiot. But just like Grip said, the placement of that audio diary tells a story in itself. It's hidden away in a drawer. It's not sitting out in the open where anyone could find it. It's concealed. Sarang was happy to talk about his theory, but he didn't want anyone finding out about it, like, say, Security Officer Strohmeyer, a man who rightfully thought it was a dangerous idea. It's not just in Theta we get this sort of attention to detail, though. Jumping right back to Upsilon in the start of the game, we learn that Carl Semken and Dami Azaro stayed back at Upsilon while the rest of the crew evacuated, trying to keep the lights on. In the control room where Carl died, a lot of the doors are locked, keeping out the monster patrolling below, and there's clothes hanging on a line. Clearly this is where Carl and Amy locked themselves in, and spent quite a bit of time together. Staying on Amy, her sketches dominate a lot of the first half of the game. They're full of life and character. One of the pages has a cute to-do list where her final task is being awesome. Aside from Terry Akers and his murderous rampage, a lot of Pathos 2's crew are characterized as incredibly likable, so we care about their plight. And there's something to be said for the dorkiness that SOMA's writers gave a lot of our scientists to make them feel real and personable. We find correspondence between two engineers, Golaski and Herbert, who were best friends. In their notes to each other, they use nicknames, Gask and Herb. These aren't the only examples, but they're neat touches and endear us to who these people once were. If this was the last of humanity, we picked them pretty well. It's just a shame then that the WoW got to them. Because it's not just in its big questions or its monster designs that SOMA's horror makes our flesh crawl. The environments do that too. In the basement of Station Theta, we see what's left of Theta's inhabitants. They're not dead, they're very much alive, smothered by structure gel, teaching us exactly what the WoW was doing to the humans, just in case you missed the struggling human Amy Azaro back at Site Upsilon. Soon, Simon will arrive at Site Omicron, where he'll be met by piles of headless corpses. Unlike with most bodies, Simon can't tap into the memories of these corpses, because they don't have black boxes anymore. Every worker on Pathos 2 had a black box inserted under their brain that monitored their condition and recorded their biometric data. All of this is taught to us through items in the environment, signage, memos, and the sudden disappearance of an ability Simon previously had. Again, it's like Thomas Grip said, everything is story, even how we interact with the environment. Another example is how we can only heal using the WoW pods, not medkits or auto-regenerating health. The WoW's healing properties, its determination to fix people, is a gameplay mechanic.
Okay, that's it. Wow, that was fun. That's a relief. Still figuring this out, so...
It was freaky. So many lights. What do we do now?
Simon eventually finds this computer at the back of Catherine's office, a database holding legacy scans that Catherine was basing her research off of. One of those scans is his. The very brain scan he did back in 2015 in David Munchie's office, back at the start of the game. The original Simon died just a couple of weeks after. Munchie's theory was sound, but not perfected. Simon's brain injury killed him anyway. On his deathbed, Simon agreed to let Munchie use his scan, like a donated organ, he says, and that turned into a template for what we're seeing on Pathos 2 100 years later. Simon is patient zero. All of this is because of him. To make matters worse, the Dumbat, the submarine, has become conscious. Someone's brain scan has taken it over and it bursts into life, trashing itself. It's unusable. We can't use it to transport the Ark. So, plan B, we're going to need to go and get it ourselves and physically carry it to the railgun. On the surface, this sounds like an awful lot of contrivance. And it is. It's all that classic video game stuff that games like BioShock also do, where a simple objective is interrupted by system failures and the like. But SOMA, just like BioShock, gets a pass. This is mainly because the pacing of the game is pretty breezy. You can tank through it in about 5 hours if you don't stop to smell the seaweed, but these obstacles, like the Dumbat blowing itself up, serve as constant reminders to how real Pathos 2 feels. In my BioShock video, I used the term life cycle simulation, where a game's world building and environmental storytelling pays particular attention to how its world works. What do they eat? Where do they sleep? Where do people poop? And a whole chunk of you came to me to point out that there was already a phrase to coin this term. Shandification, an awesome word brought up by the channel Mr. B. Tongue, based off of the novel Tristram Shandy. But you would forgive me for not knowing that, seeing as his video on the subject got fucking copyright struck by the NBA and is now unwatchable. God damn, YouTube is a hellhole. SOMA's Shandification is on full display. Attention and care has been taken to make sure Pathos 2 feels like it did exist, does exist, and could exist. We know what the crew ate, we know where they slept, and we definitely know where they poop. We uncover that each of the stations here were made for a specific purpose. Site Delta was for manufacturing, Upsilon was the power plant, Site Alpha doesn't exist. We don't talk about it, don't ask about it. Interacting with Pathos 2 is rarely ever as simple as pushing a button on a dashboard. It's far more realistic and weighted. Just look at how we open a door later. Turn the dial, pull the thing, grab the lever. Frictional's physics engine is something they designed themselves, are very proud of, and continue to use, even in 2023, simply because it forces a kinetic tie between the player and the player character. I need to feel the weight of the doors I'm opening. I need to feel the tug of heavy objects in the world. And remember, the fact many of our actions take just a beat too long also adds to the palpability of the game's tension. Many of Pathos 2's computers have incidental information that isn't useful or connected to our objectives, but it adds texture and flavor to each room on a station and informs the work the crew did. It's like someone working at Frictional shit themselves that scientists would play this and actually it to death like the comment section of my second channel Lore Dump, links below. For example, Simon will eventually look at a diver's suit and we're given all sorts of information about it, right down to the sort of temperatures it can withstand. Minus 75 degrees centigrade? Huh, looks like Americans lose the temperature war in the future.
Oh no, WoW got to the Dunbat before we did, am I right?
Well, it was talking. That's rarely a good sign.
Damn it. The Dunbat was our best shot. I was really banking on this to work.
Come on, we can't quit now. There's gotta be another way. How do you think you did it? How did the team get the Ark down the abyss in the first place?
Even puzzles have intrinsic layers of clunkiness and complexity to feel as real as possible. Earlier, Simon needs to summon a Zeppelin to get to Site Theta. In order to do that, we need to read the information given to us on Console 1, find Console 2, read the information given to us by Console 2, and figure out which Zeppelin would take us to Site Theta, use the information of both consoles to figure out which Zeppelins are still online, align the correct coordinates and send a signal to an online Zeppelin, bleep bloop the buttons to summon it, bash in a robot to steal its Cortex chip. Rest in peace, Goya. That's a lot of steps for what essentially boils down to flicking a switch, but it encourages the player to drink deep of SOMA's atmosphere and the mechanical complexity of its world. Here in the Ark engineering room, Simon finds the precious Ark. It's just a little metal box, but we need to configure the virtual world that all of the brain scans will experience, combining various assets and code like water physics or trees to simulate a realistic environment. In reality, we're just adding up the numbers so we don't go above 1,152 terabytes. But the context and all of the extra, tasty, unnecessary information we're given makes us feel much more fulfilling because it matters. The Ark is important, the world these brain scans will experience is important, and the player is tricked into feeling like they have some creative control over what it will look like. Once the Ark is configured, Catherine tells Simon to step into a scanning chamber. It'll take a scan of his brain, ready to be uploaded to the Ark. And it's in here that she learns what exactly we are. Simon's body has the genetic code of Imogen Reed. It's not just that it's an empty husk, a corpse. He's puppeting a dead person's body stuck in a diver's suit by structure gel. That's all he is, the gel and the corpse. Tiny visual sensors dimly glow from under the suit. Simon might feel human, but he's physically less human than a flesher. Before we leave Station Theta, I want to take a moment to pay my respects to Brandon Wan. Born on October 16, 2070 in Hong Kong, Brandon was an engineer stationed at Site Delta. There, he worked with a team made up of Javid Goya, Astrid Krier, and Terry Akers. He became friends with most of them, with Javid Goya affectionately calling him Brand. After the comet hit Earth, he was relocated to Site Theta, where he met and fell in love with Alice Coster. When the day came to have his brain scan taken, he was so nervous that he asked Alice to be with him during the procedure. On January 16, 2104, Site Theta was overrun by a mutated Terry Akers. Brandon stayed behind in order for his colleagues to escape. He sealed himself in the basement of Theta so Akers couldn't follow them. Trapped down there, he cut his throat with a knife, determined not to be killed by the monster that was once his friend. Brandon Wan is a fucking legend. Brandon Wan doesn't deserve what we do to him.
That wasn't so bad. This trauma really got me worked up, bastard. What? How did I get here?
While exploring Theta, Simon and Catherine realize they need a security key, so they upload a brain scan of Brandon Wan into a simulation where they hope they can talk him into giving it up. We can simulate conversations with him in a beach, a ski lodge, or a room that looks just like Catherine's scan room. Every single time, he freaks out, so we need to learn more about him and rummage through his stuff to make the simulation smoother. Eventually, Simon learns about Brandon's relationship with Alice, so Catherine makes a crude copy of her, pretends to be her, and ultimately convinces Brandon to give up the information we need. It is one of the best sequences in the game, and every time I play it, it hurts. The moral choice the player is given comes after we've tricked Brandon. Do we erase his brain scan? There's already a copy of him safely on the Ark. This isn't the only Brandon, but is it fair to leave him here in a perpetual state of non-existence until someone or something turns him on?
This is Sussex campus. Welcome to my university. This is what it looks like on a Tuesday lunchtime. Except that it doesn't, of course. What we did here is we took a panoramic video of this courtyard at Sussex. So 360-degree video, and then we processed every frame through a particular program, and that program was basically like a network, a neural network that's usually used. You feed it information in at the bottom, and it tells you what's in the image. And we ran it backwards, and we basically fixed it so that it's to say dog, and then we ran it backwards and updated every frame of this image to project dog back into it. And then we sort of strung them all together in a movie, and people put a headset on and they look around and suddenly there are dogs everywhere.
This is Anil Seth presenting at the Northern Ireland Science Festival in 2015. Here he's talking about a hallucination machine he and his colleagues created at the University of Sussex, and after preliminary tests they took it a step further. A person would enter a lab, put a VR headset on with a camera fixed to the front. They were told that that headset would simply show them a live feed of the lab as they looked around, but this was a lie. What they were in fact looking at was a pre-recorded panoramic view of the same lab from earlier in the day. Nobody was able to tell the difference between the real lab and the pre-recorded lab, but the majority of them exhibited severe stress, nausea, and discomfort hours later, after being told the truth. This is a lot like Brandon. He doesn't know he's in a simulated version of Catherine's lab, but something tells him it isn't right, and he exhibits high stress levels. Every time we start and stop the simulation, we're essentially creating and erasing a new version of Brandon. Here's Brandon 4 at the beach, here's Brandon 6 in a ski lodge. There is no continuity between each version of Brandon that we activate. It's not like Catherine where her soul lives in a cortex chip that we carry with us and she experiences continuity. Every time we get this puzzle wrong, Brandon is given life and killed. For him, consciousness isn't a dimmer switch. We're literally turning him on or off. The final choice given to us to completely erase his brain scan or not isn't the horrifying part. It's the fact we're erasing copies of Brandon over and over again because they all have different experiences. Brandon at the beach has a different conscious experience from Brandon at the ski lodge. SOMA puts us into a state where we play God with someone's soul, discarding him when he's no longer useful to us.
I'm sorry, Mr. Long. Brandon. Goodbye.
What do you mean? No, wait.
That's enough. We got what we need.
But of course, all of these Brandons have something in common. Their memories prior to the brain scan are all identical, and it's here, I think, that SOMA draws its line in the sand for what it believes the soul to be. In 1690, the philosopher John Locke published his work, An Essay Concerning Human Understanding. It's a beast of a philosophical text, but one of his ultimate conclusions is that memory is what matters most when understanding identity. Where we've been, who we've met, the thoughts we've had, and the experience we can recollect shape the person we are. If suddenly you got knocked on the head and forgot all of that, you would become a completely different person. Your soul would change to a new soul. Quote, a person is a thinking, intelligent being that has reason and reflection and can consider itself the same thinking thing in different times and places. That sounds a lot like Carl Semken, Robin Bass, Javid Goya, Brandon Wan, Catherine, and Simon, right? Every single Brandon we wake up has memories of Catherine, of being in her lab, of getting the brain scan, of being terrified of it, of wanting Alice in the room with him. When his memories get contradicted by the simulation, that's when his sense of self starts to implode. If he wakes up on a beach instead of the lab, he freaks out. When he can't see Catherine, he freaks out. When he realizes Alice isn't in the room anymore, he freaks out. The brain scan of Brandon has the same experiences of stress that Seth's human test subjects had when they tried out his hallucination machine. He has the same reliance on memory that John Locke claimed was so important. He exhibits free will when he demands Catherine show herself. For all intents and purposes, this is a human being with memories that inform his self, his soul. But then there's this little nugget to consider.
I haven't been able to dream since 4017. I think it does something to your brain when it scoops you out. Do you dream?
Before SOMA came out, Frictional released a series of short videos on their channel in the form of transmissions, documenting the events leading up to the fall of Pathos 2. In the episodes, we meet Imogen Reed, the ill-fated engineer whose corpse Simon is currently puppeting, and Adam Golaski, a chief engineer who drank structure gel just like Terry Akers did. I haven't been able to dream since the scan, Golaski says. So, do the brain scans take something from you? It's a question that's never answered or explored any further, arguably to the game and show's detriment. Golaski isn't a reliable mouthpiece, he's slowly going insane from all of that structure gel he's chugging, but if a human loses the ability to dream after the brain scan, is that ability passed over to the scan itself? And if so, does that mean Brandon 2 is more of a fulfilled self than Brandon 1 was after the scan? To Simon and Catherine, it doesn't matter. No matter which Brandon they're speaking to, they just shut him off and try again if he's not cooperating. Just a few feet away from Brandon's simulation is the computer where Simon finds out his brain scan was the first one, the legacy scan that informed all of this. And he has a choice there too. Does he erase his own data? This is one hell of a question to ask the player if they've gotten tangled up in philosophical knots by this point. Even if you think that there's nothing worth living for on Pathos 2, does Simon 2 have any right to delete Simon 1's brain scan? Because by this point, they're two different people. Simon 2 has experienced Pathos 2, his impression of the world, of life, is coloured by the horrors he's witnessed under the sea. He's a different person now than he was when he woke up at the start of the game. This might as well say Monty Xander on the screen for all it matters. But again, there's a huge chunk of memory that Simon 1 and Simon 2 share. The car accident, Ashley, his apartment. How different are they, really? Is it murder to kill your past self? As for Brandon, the idea of subjecting copies of this guy to ritualistic torture like this means, emotionally, I always erase him from the computer out of fear that the WoW will eventually upload Brandon into a robot body. In the moment, it feels like we're putting him out of his misery. But rationally, I think doing this is murder. Not just of this original brain scan, but for all of the consenting, adult, potential versions of Brandon that might come from it.
Okay, we need to find you a power suit. You know, so we can go into the abyss without ending up like a recycled can of soda?
With the Ark activated, Simon sends it off to the railgun. Eternity among the stars is just a hop, skip and swim away, but unfortunately the railgun is situated at Station Phi. The diving suit Simon's wearing isn't strong enough to get there, he'll be crushed by the pressure of the ocean, so he's going to need to explore Station Omicron to get all the pieces he needs to wear a new one. Omicron is a multi-leveled complex. Some rooms are closed off and we need to unlock them as we go. Robot Head prowls in the basement level. A lot of our time is spent on consoles, unlocking doors, and managing the— what the fuck was that? Just the computer speaking to us, telling us to stop something. Probably not important. Calm down, Monty, we're just over halfway, keep your nerve. While Simon collects a Cortex chip, a battery pack, and some structure gel, let's talk about how SOMA approaches choice and immersion. Even outside of the conditioning of the game's opening, SOMA is very reactive to the player's actions. I don't necessarily mean that in game-changing ways like, say, Baldur's Gate. There's only one ending, there aren't significant chunks of game that are opened up or locked off depending on what choices we make, but the beat-to-beat decision-making is acknowledged by the game on the regular. For example, if we erase Simon's legacy scan in Catherine's computer, he'll come up as unavailable when testing the prototype Ark later. If we check the Curie submarine before finding Catherine, Simon's dialogue changes where he references that he found it already. When Simon boards the shuttle to Station Lambda to meet Catherine, we can choose our destination, Delta, Theta, wherever. It crashes regardless, but it adds a sense of fluidity to our choices. Even if the game course corrects to get us where we need to go, this reactivity makes the player feel, at least briefly, like they can do something the game doesn't want them to do. So why is this important? Like we discussed at the start, it makes Simon tangible. It makes the game world feel more real, which as a result makes the really tough choices have more weight. But what the game's reactivity also does is hype up the immersion. With the lights down and headphones on, the relationship between the player and Simon can be pretty similar to the relationship between, say, the human Carl Semken when he was in a pilot seat controlling a robot body. One part of our brain is really into the game, the metallic clangs, the bizarre claustrophobia of the ocean floor, but another part of our brain is acutely aware that we're sitting in our living room, sipping some tea, playing a game. I know this is all kind of a no-duh situation, but what's really interesting for SOMA is how our brain physically reacts when we play games. According to the psychologist Werner Wirth, among others, our brain achieves immersion through spatial awareness. Basically, to become immersed in something, our brain reconstructs what we're seeing in our mind so that our senses can better interact with it. And coolest of all, our brain starts to subconsciously identify where it is as inside the game. Not so much that it's damaging or removes all sense of self-awareness, but essentially our self, for microscopic seconds at a time, lives inside our brain's interpretation of Pathos 2. That's the ironic thing about immersion. What we're being immersed in isn't the game, it's our idea of it. Those of us who love playing horror games almost will our brain into tricking us, into forming that player-character connection so we can enjoy the thrill of being scared. The way SOMA reacts to our choices simply makes it easier for our brain to trick us. The game has a few angles that contribute to this immersion. There's no map, no inventory system. Absolutely everything is in-game, in the room with Simon. The lack of map adds to the feeling of being lost and helpless, and despite the fact each level of SOMA is actually quite small, it makes these spaces feel much bigger. There's plenty of signs to guide us, it's very rare a player will actually get stuck, but that illusion of helplessness is really strong. And the fact that so much of our playtime is given over to finding our way strengthens this immersion as well, because it's cognitive. We need to think and wonder and use the information the game gives us to progress. Pathos 2 isn't just one linear corridor, it's numerous rooms, labs and chambers that force us to think about our next steps. Aaron Clifford, a 3D artist at Frictional Games, told Game Reactor, quote, "With SOMA, we've tried to stay away from anything you could identify as a game mechanic, like the sanity meter or picking up tinderboxes in Amnesia. We felt they draw you out of the experience. People enjoyed it, but with SOMA, we want the whole thing to be about immersing you in the world." We never ever stop controlling Simon. Control isn't ripped away from the player for a cutscene. There isn't a single loading screen outside of booting up the game. Even opening doors forces us to control the swing or the tug of a handle. Every single thing that happens in SOMA is influenced by the player. Nothing is ever given to us, and that adds to the most uncomfortable way that SOMA injects dread into the player. Guilt. It's not the game that keeps reactivating Brandon 1, it's Simon, it's us. It's not the game that kills Robin Bass, it's Simon, it's us.
Anything I can do?
If you see Masters or Holland, tell them I need help, okay? Amy needs help.
And what do most people do when we get a little tinge of guilt? That little voice in our head that says, you shouldn't have done that? Well, we justify it. I didn't recycle today. It's fine. I'm just one guy. My carbon footprint won't be that big. I didn't give that homeless person any money. Well, I'm skint too. If I give money to every homeless person I met, I'd be homeless myself. So on and so on and so on. The choice involving Amy Azzaro is a great crystallizer of everything I've just raised. She's an entirely optional choice. We need to find her so we're super immersed. Some players won't even cross her unless they're looking for her. I know I missed her on my first playthrough. She's hidden away in a tunnel before boarding the shuttle to Site Lambda. She's glued to the wall. The WoW's tentacles are burrowing into her, healing her, keeping her alive. It won't let me die, she says. Nothing is allowed to die. A lot of SOMA's choices are framed as take action or don't take action. In Amy's case, we can either kill her or leave. Do something or nothing. Influence this world or leave it untouched. There are no dialogue options because Simon has his own person with his own personality, so whenever he talks to Catherine, it's him speaking. And this simplistic way that SOMA's choice system has been created mainly works because the situations we're in are both vague and often binary. When Amy asks us to kill her, there's no third answer to that situation, no way to think around the problem. She wants to die, she's in pain. We can see that she's being transformed into something that barely resembles a human being. Death or life, is the only option. But what exactly that means is entirely up to the player's interpretation. There are a million what-if scenarios that we can consider with every choice that make them heavier and tougher, and because the choice itself is so simple, we're encouraged to focus on the what-ifs and less on the mechanical complexities of the choice itself. Something is keeping Amy alive. At this early point in the game, we don't know it's the WoW. We don't know that the WoW is turning people into monsters. We can barely get much information out of Amy because she's so weak, so the what-ifs are all that we have. What if there are people left elsewhere in the station who can help her? She mentioned a couple of names, maybe they could rescue her. What if killing her alerts a monster to our presence? What if her body is siphoning power to the shuttle? Do we need her alive to get to Lambda? With Robin Bass lost and alone at the bottom of the ocean, we considered the fact that she might not be alone for long. What if Javid Goya eventually swims over to her and the two form a relationship? With Brandon 1, what if the WoW uploads his brain scan into a robot body? That could be life in the physical world that we take away by erasing him, or it could be endless torture. The pacing of these choices is key as well. Soon we'll be faced with a choice that's very similar to Amy Azaro, where Simon meets the last human and is asked to unplug her life support. But the way we justified killing Amy won't be useful when justifying killing the last human, because there's so much context that we've learned between the two choices. We now know what was happening to Amy. We now have had the time to reflect on our feelings about the WoW. We now have had other choices that have made us reconfigure how we think about the human condition. The most uncomfortable thing about playing SOMA, I think, is that process of justification. It's only human to set out a belief system and want to stick to it, and when the game offers up different moral dilemmas, contexts, and situations, we are forced to bend that belief system. Killing Carl is fine. He's just a robot, right? Oh god, Carl's a human's brain scan trapped in a metal body. But I had to kill him. It was either that or leaving him in pain forever. Oh, here's Robin Bass. She's not in pain, but she is trapped like Carl was. I could just leave her here. But is that fair? Her quality of life sucks. It's a mercy to unplug her. Oh god, here's Brandon 1. He's not trapped. He's not even conscious until someone boots him up. But his quality of life sucks when he does come to life because he's alone in a simulation. Is it right to erase his data and kill him?
I never realized how much the idea of myself depended on where I am.
How do you mean?
I miss Toronto. Not because my friends and family are there, but because I know where I fit in. In Toronto, I know who I am.
That's an interesting observation.
Through this piece of dialogue, SOMA acknowledges that it's the sum of our experiences that make us who we are. Simon thinks that his time in Toronto, the friends he made, his feelings for Ashley, they all informed his personality, and a copy of that personality was transported 100 years into the future. This is a belief system that's shared by the psychiatrist Carl Jung, but he went a step further, questioning how our experiences inform the way we make choices, and alters how we see free will. In his work Aeon, he writes, "Just as our free will clashes with necessity in the outside world, so also it finds its limits outside the field of consciousness in the subjective inner world." Jung's reading of free will is kinda like an iceberg. We can conscientiously make choices using all of the information present, like when I killed K8 rather than Javid Goya. Conscientiously, I was thinking about how Javid Goya has more of a right to life because he's a human brain scam. That was the tip of the iceberg. Trickling down, there's a whole host of experiences and biases that influence what choices we make. Maybe I have a dog that K8 reminds me of, so subconsciously I'd be more inclined to save her. Early in his career, Jung called all of this, the conscious and subconscious stuff that makes up who we are, total personality. But as the years went by, he eventually started calling it the self, and claimed that human life is so fleeting that 100 years is simply not long enough to reach psychological wholeness, to fully understand consciously who we are deep down. So if we can't ever fully look inside ourselves and see every shard of ice that makes up the iceberg of our soul, we can't ever truly be self-aware. And if we can't be self-aware, what right do we have to inflict our murky, grey, confused and psychologically incomplete will over the world? If I was in Simon's position faced with Amy Azaro, what right do I have to make any kind of decision about her fate? How do we know if the tip of the iceberg is enough? There's a just the tip joke in there somewhere, but I'm too depressed to find it. Collecting the parts he needs, Simon journeys back through Omicron to reunite with Catherine. But as he does, he meets Dr. Johan Ross, who doesn't deal in what-ifs, he deals in certainties. He was a brilliant neuroscientist and AI psychologist that helped to develop the WoW in the first place, but seeing it get out of control, he came to the conclusion that it needs to be destroyed. However, before he could, he was attacked by marine life and knocked unconscious. The WoW, following its ultimate directive to preserve all human life, used structure gel to fix him. Ross, despite being critically injured and remolded by the WoW, has inexplicably been able to retain his memories, his speech, and sense of identity. He's acutely aware of what the WoW did to him, except now he has the ability to teleport and speak telepathically. He's a bit ugly now, but honestly, the WoW's given him superpowers. He embodies a different kind of humanity. He's almost transhuman. But just like Catherine, he's entirely goal-oriented. He still wants to destroy the WoW, and he wants Simon's help to do it. But this Simon, Simon 2, unfortunately won't be able to help.
So if we admit that there are two different people, each of whom has half my brain and is psychologically just like me, if they're two different people, they can't each be one and the same person, me. It'd be absurd to suppose that I'm one of them and not the other. No reason to suppose that. So I think we should conclude, yes, neither of them would be me. I would cease to exist.
Introducing the philosopher Derek Parfit, most famous for creating the teletransportation paradox. He asks us to imagine stepping into a machine that will break us down atom by atom and send us to Mars. We think when we're entering the machine that it will simply send us across space at the speed of light, but in reality, the machine is copying our body, our brain, our personality, our memories, and recreating it all to form a perfect replica on Mars. Physically, we'd die on Earth, but on Mars, a replica of us would step out of a machine and continue existing, believing wholeheartedly that the transportation worked. That replica would go about the rest of its life not realizing that the original version died so it could awaken on Mars. Which version is the true you? Well, doesn't matter, Parfit's not done with the analogy. He introduces something called the branch line case. He asks us to imagine that the machine doesn't kill us, but it still copies every atom and still makes a replica on Mars. Suddenly, there's two of you, separated by the vastness of space. But still the question needs to be asked, which version is the true you? If a comet suddenly crashed into Earth and killed the original, would it be fair to say that the version on Mars, the only version still existing, is in fact you? Funny you should ask, Derek, because someone at Frictional clearly read about the teletransportation paradox and put it into SOMA. Simon's about to find himself in that exact situation.
It will be fine.
Then why don't we put you in the suit?
I was gonna suggest that if you refused.
You'd go without me.
I need to do this, Simon. This is important. I need to launch the Ark.
Simon pours the structure gel, the battery pack and the Cortex chip into a diving suit and prepares to have his mind transported over to his shiny new supersuit. This one will let him descend deeper into the ocean and reach the Ark. Catherine tells him to strap in while she uploads his mind and sends him over. A flash of white, a glimmer of static, and when Simon opens his eyes, he's sitting in his new body. But something feels off.
Must be something wrong. Can't you run a diagnosis or something?
What was that?
No, it's just...
Why was it still talking?
It's the same like before.
Catherine, why was he still talking?
Simon's mind wasn't transported, it was copied. We're now playing as Simon number 3. Simon 2, the man we've controlled since waking up at Site Upsilon, sits on the other side of the room. It feels like continuity because we, the player, have body hopped. Me, Monty, sitting in my chair, I experience continuity. But in reality, we're now playing as a clone of Simon. 2 Simons? He shouts. There can't be 2 Simons. He loses it. He doesn't understand. He didn't pay attention when we were talking about how continuity theory is dumb. He thought it would be like having a brain transplant. He swears blind, he calls Catherine disgusting, and Catherine, panicking, makes the previous Simon fall unconscious. She puts him on pause so she and Simon 3 can hash it out.
So cruel.
Well, what do you want me to do with him? Make friends? Let him know that we have to leave him behind when we go into the abyss?
What if he didn't need to wake up?
Our choice, as always, is mechanically simple. Either we cut Simon 2's power, killing him, or we leave him behind, alone at Site Omicron, without Catherine or a single human to help. He's not in the super duper diving suit, he can't follow us to the Ark. When he wakes, he'll be confused, he'll think Catherine abandoned him, and most likely, he'll slowly lose his mind as he realizes he's trapped in here. Catherine has locked the only entrance to the lab, and on the other side is Robot Head, waiting to break in and go on a murderous rampage. So, back to Derek. He argues that the teletransportation paradox clearly shows how memory isn't this all-important thing that defines our sense of self. After all, you and your clone have the same memories up until the moment of cloning, but you're clearly not the same person, right? Well, I think he makes a fundamental logical error when he says that. He assumes that the self has to be unique. For a split second, when the upload is completed, Simon 2 and Simon 3 are the same person in different bodies. They both have the same memories, the same expectations. It only takes a moment for their selves to split into two new selves. Simon 2 has the experience of thinking the upload didn't work, and that fires off a whole host of subconscious and conscious thoughts, fears, sensations, and memories. Simon 3 thinks it has worked, and he's already experiencing new sensations, like how the new diving suit feels to wear, and how horrible it feels to realize he's going to need to abandon or kill Simon 2. But for a crack in time, Simon 2 and Simon 3 are the same person. Simon 2's self isn't unique. Like I said at the start, the soul is dead and Soma killed it. There can be two Simons, just like there could be two Montys. There could be 50, 1,000. You could fill a city with clones of me and it'd be a goddamn utopia because I'm awesome. And we would all, for a brief second, when the cloning is complete, for that millisecond of consciousness, have identical souls. The same way we have identical bodies. But as minutes pass, hours, days, and we all went off on our journeys and had our own unique experiences, those Montys would change. One Monty might kill a guy, another might dye his hair. Those memories would shape them into different people, different selves, different souls. But for the religious among you, here's a lovely unanswerable question. What does that mean for the afterlife? Is there room in heaven for two identical souls?
Is there some kind of afterlife? Do you think my place is taken? The real me died like 100 years ago. Is there still room for me?
Technically, there is one thing, just one, that differentiates Simon 2 and Simon 3 in that millisecond of waking. Simon 2 actively experienced everything we experienced. He worked through Site Upsilon. He tortured Brandon Wan. He confronted Terry Akers at Site Theta. He did those things, physically, in his robot body. Simon 3 might have the memories, he might have been shaped and molded by those experiences, but nobody can say that he did them. Can they? But if that is the only way we can tell the difference between them, does that mean we're back to where we started? Soma's name is taken from the Greek for body. Despite the fact every cell inside us is replaced every 7 to 10 years, are we saying the actions of our physical body is the only thing that matters? Have I missed the point this whole video? Focusing on the brain and neuroscience? Should I have been talking about the physical body and the acts of the physical body in the physical world? Something, let's get physical. Is that active experience enough to say one Simon is more important than another Simon? Because Simon 2 might have physically experienced everything so far, but Simon 3 will be able to go down to Station Tau. He'll be able to complete the goal of launching the Ark. He has more potential for future physical actions than Simon 2 does. Once Simon 2 wakes up, all he'll be able to do is sit in this room and go mad, or eventually leave it and be ripped to shreds by Robot Head. Just like Robin Bass, just like Carl Semken, just like Amy Azzaro, his quality of life is limited because he doesn't have as many choices offered to him. I have 30 minutes of footage in this room, and this is my 4th playthrough. Sitting quietly with Simon 2 as he sleeps dreamlessly, I think it's the best and toughest dilemma in the game. And in the end, the only reason I turned off the power and killed him is because of how important I think our physical actions are. As we saw, Soma's choices are often take action or don't. I think I owed it to Simon 2 to act on his behalf. The half hour that follows is quiet, peaceful, and disconcerting. Simon marches through an oceanic abyss towards Station Tau. The Ark is waiting for us, but it's not the only thing down here. The vastness of Soma's oceanic environments and the depth of care and sickening attention given to them is one of the game's more harrowing strengths. It's brilliant, and I hate it.
Jesus, did you see that?
Stick to the lamplights. They won't go near them.
I can't, Valglasser. It's important I reach Omicron. Our future depends on it.
I have severe thalassophobia. If given the choice between suffocating to death while floating through space or suffocating to death while falling through the ocean, I'd pick space every single time. At least that way I'd get to see the beauty of the galaxy in my dying moments. Space has stretches of nothingness, not even oxygen coats us. There's something freeing about that absence of stuff. But under the ocean, you're swallowed by water, by pressure, by creatures so alien that it's inescapable. And seeing as SOMA's creative director said that a third of the game takes place in the ocean, this section is dedicated to how the game makes it captivating and terrifying. But first, some quick did you knows. Get your geek glasses on, this is super cool. Did you know that as of 2023, over 80% of the Earth's oceans remain unexplored? Some NASA scientists have theorized that we know more about Mars than we do about the sea. Some of the ocean is engulfed by huge water vortexes, some that span 150 kilometers, that swallow up anything unfortunate enough to get too close. The deepest part of the ocean is called the Challenger Deep, and falls at about 36,200 feet. That's 6,033 Ms. That's too many Ms. Station Tau isn't that deep, but at almost 14,000 feet, over 2,000 Ms, it descends into my own personal hell. SOMA's ocean is both expansive and suffocating. Because Pathos 2 is so old and creaky, we're constantly reminded of the pressure that could crush us at any moment, like the station is fighting against the water to operate. But when we're out in the dewy blue hue, the emptiness that stretches on for miles, aside from some winking dots of light, reminds us of just how alone we truly are. But you might be thinking, all of this could be achieved on a space station, right? Games like Dead Space structured itself to keep revolving around the crumbling, dying engineering of the USG Ishimura, and while you could claim that that makes the plot feel a little bit like busywork, those goals kept up the tension by reinforcing how the ship itself could kill everyone on board, aliens be damned. But I think choosing an ocean setting for SOMA gets to add something a space station wouldn't. Frictional reveled in how the early teasers for the game initially tricked us into thinking it would be set in space, but these giggling, goading bastards chose the ocean because of how it tied to the game's big questions. The ocean is a harrowing, mysterious abyss, but it's part of our home. Pathos 2 isn't humanity among the stars, it's our last gasp to cling to a form of life that is long, long gone. It's been replaced with tentacular AIs and brain scans and robots. The setting of the ocean demands that we ask what the point of all of this really is. After all, a comet destroyed our home. Our goal is to literally launch a vestige of souls into space. Space is the goal because the ocean is so horrific. The sound design and architecture of the ocean floor cultivates that horror. In fact, SOMA's sound space is absolutely insane, especially for such a small team. In the words of Samuel Justice, SOMA's audio director, the final sound effects count for SOMA is slightly eye-watering, clocking in at a little over 18,000 sound effects files, not including voiceover and music. The loudest sound, the most present during the ocean segments, is Simon's breathing. It's an effective trick because A, it's more immersive. Anyone who's been scuba diving will tell you your breath is all you can hear, and because it hides the sounds of the ocean, we feel more uncertain about the darkness ahead. And B, because Simon isn't physically breathing. He's a robot in a structure gel suit. During the early sequences, this simply tricks us into thinking of Simon as biologically human. But where we are right now, right after leaving Simon 2 and picking up as Simon 3, makes the breathing feel uncanny, artificial, uneasy, because we know explicitly that Simon isn't breathing like this. His senses are lying to him. Jagged rocks and cliffs stand overhead like giants, trapping Simon underwater. Our field of vision is rightfully restricted, obscuring secrets, threats, with occasional reminders of the human ingenuity and novelty that let us expand into this underwater world. It's not that we conquered the ocean, but we at least started to venture into it and build around it. The engineers of Pathos 2 have tried to put little stamps, little glimmers of human life on the ocean floor. Piping, zeppelins, hubs, but it's the signage, the lights that guide our way, the information provided that tells us how deep we are and how long our journey is between each settlement that shows just how small our impact was on the sea. It's during Simon's journey to Station Tau that this small impact is seen best. This is the darkest, the most claustrophobic the game ever gets. We're descending to the deepest part of Pathos 2. Each step takes us further away from the Earth's surface, further away from where human life once flourished, meaning the level design is literally reflecting the game's themes back at us. We need to follow lights and flares, and there are specific periods of time where we can't see those lights or those flares that make our travels feel momentarily aimless. If you're not carefully paying attention to those lights, and specifically the fact that blue leads to Tau and red leads back the way we came, you can get turned around and lost really easily. And then there's the grossness. Marine life can be found in the ocean to add texture and realism, but a lot of them have been infected with structure gel by the WoW. Crabs scuttle through the sand, schools of fish float by aimlessly, and at first glance this can all seem pretty tranquil, but it's en route to Station Tau that the creepiness factor is upped. Sea spiders, anglerfish and crawdads cling to walls and tunnels. That last species follows octopi in that neurologically they're the most removed from human beings, with brain structures that have altogether different shapes. Octopi's brains extend right out to the tips of their tentacles, for example, much like the WoW. For the first time, fish life attack us as well. Anglerfish trick the player because of the lights hanging from their head. We've been so well conditioned to look for pinpricks of light by this point that it looks like a point of safety, but as soon as we get close, they charge us, spiked teeth ready to chew on Simon's motherboard. Even when we're inside the stations, we're unable to escape the oceanic abyss outside. This isn't like Bioshock's Rapture, where we can periodically forget about the storm of water surrounding the city. Pathos 2's scientists were studying the natural aquarium on their doorstep, and we see labs, papers and research devoted to that study. The metal rusts. Mollusks and barnacles coat the sticky walls. Amy Azzaro sketched the mutations of the fish. At Site Lambda, a bot tries to bash its way into the lab from the outside. Jars of monstrous creatures are set up across the whole facility, and we pick up that the scientists saw that the WoW's early experiments were on the sea life.
My whole life, I've been a good man. We messed up, Sarah.
There.
Reaching Site Tau, we see that the structure gel has completely dominated the facility. Human beings are imprisoned in it, completely changing. It's a slow, cocoon-like process, showing the evolution at its most grotesque. We're following in the footsteps of Catherine 1 and her team, desperately trying to launch the Ark themselves, but it seems like something stopped them. The quarters of Tau are a showcase in the slow decline of the WoW's victims. Johan Ross's room has a journal, diagrams, sketches and scribbles documenting his obsession with the evolution of our strange AI. It encased itself in structure gel, growing at an astronomical rate until it could feed itself into the other facilities in the ocean itself. Given time, it might just dominate the entire seabed. What happened here? It isn't long before we get an answer in one of our final monsters. It's a suit overflowing with structure gel. Something must be inside the corpse of a Pathos 2 worker, but making one of our final baddies a creature that directly resembles Simon mirrors his own lack of humanity back at him. Is this how we look? Is this how other denizens of the station see us? What have we become?
Ich bin the Theta.
There's not a lot left of Pathos 2.
And, I'm the only living person you've met? You mean I'm the last living human on the planet?
A payload technician called Sarah Lindwall sees through Simon's monstrous shell and finds the soul underneath. She's very much human, locked away in her quarters. The structure gel hasn't quite broken in here, not yet, and she's slowly fading away, plugged into man-made life support. "You're different," she gasps, and begs Simon to kill her. She's surrounded by pictures and photographs of the surface. No oceanic imagery whatsoever, it's just trees, plant life, greenery, and a sun that now seems so far away that it's hard to imagine it ever existed. SOMA's watery abyss is so convincing, so enthralling, so fucking maddening that Sarah's pictures seem almost fake. But they're real, every bit as real as she is. The choice to kill the last human is an accumulation of every other choice so far. Amy Azzaro was human and she begged us to kill her, but she was mid-transformation. Carl Semken's senses might have felt pain, but he was a robot with a brain scan. Robin Bass might not have been in any pain, but she was trapped under rubble and deluded about her surroundings. Sarah Lindwall is the last human. There are what-ifs connected to this choice. What if she's not the last human? What if the comet didn't wipe everyone out? What if she changes her mind after we turn off the power? But there's no question about whether or not she has a right to life, or clones, or if she even has a soul. She's as human as you or me. Or maybe I've been an AI this whole time, wahaha. No, the question here with Sarah is a classic spiritual one. She wants to die. Do we help her? If you unplug the life support, her vision goes first. Blind and losing focus, her final thoughts are about other people. She talks about Greenland, about the 12 million strong city of Nanook. I can't tell you exactly why, but I think there's something really poetic about that. The last human's last thought is about a group of people, a full civilization on the surface, a bundle of her colleagues that she was fond of. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre said that hell is other people. I think in her final moments, Sarah Lindwall disagreed.
Don't let them die, okay? Send them out there. To the stars.
Dear ChatGPT, does the WoW in the video game SOMA have a soul?
If we define a soul in terms of consciousness or self-awareness, the question is murky. The WoW is highly advanced and adaptive, but it operates based on its programming to preserve humanity at any cost. It doesn't seem to exhibit novelty, personal desires, emotions, or self-awareness. It is more like an extremely complex algorithm rather than a conscious being.
So I kinda call bullshit on this, but let's get the context. Following Station Tau and Sarah Lindwall, Simon braces himself for the endgame. The Ark and the satellite launcher are waiting for us at Station Phi, just over the ridge, but the path there takes him on a detour into the mysterious Site Alpha, the home of the WoW's central core.
Just tell me what you want.
Alpha wasn't on any maps. Only a small handful of people, including Johann Ross, knew it existed so that nobody could try to sabotage it. This meant that when Ross tried to convince Pathos 2's workers that they needed to destroy the WoW, they didn't really know how. Its core was based in Site Alpha, and everyone thought that was just a myth. Unfortunately, that means it's up to Simon to make the big decision. Do we destroy the WoW? The structure gel we put inside ourselves to make Simon 3 was a specially created kind, a kind of toxin that will be able to poison it. For all of its power and influence, killing the thing might be the easiest job in the game. There's a common criticism I've seen that confronting the WoW feels bolted on to SOMA, rather than something it's been organically building to. Zero Punctuation claimed,
"On the way to the final area to conclude the Simon story, a new character literally appears from nowhere. It pops his head around the door and says, 'Sorry to interrupt, player, but before you tie up the main plot, could we borrow you for 5 minutes to tie up the shitty monster plot as well?' So you follow him into a little room, press one button labelled 'Resolve Shitty Monster Plot', and then get on with what you were doing. I'm only slightly exaggerating." I
know Yahtzee Crowshaw's style leans into hyperbole and exaggeration, but this criticism misses how integral the WoW is to every inch of Simon's story. None of this, none of the choices, none of the brain scans, none of the existentialism would exist without the WoW. It's the crux of the tale, the foundations of the game's philosophy. Removing the WoW quite literally unmakes SOMA, and when you really think about it, this is one of the most weighted choices in the game.
Is it the WoW's fault that we're like this? I mean, it seems like something an unreliable AI would do.
I suppose it set the ball in motion, but it's not directed with purpose.
When the comet crashed, the WoW redefined its ultimate protocol. Keep everyone alive turned into keep everyone alive at all costs. Hours before here, Simon jokes that the whole evil AI shtick seems a little rote, and Catherine explains that the WoW isn't evil. It can't comprehend morality, it can't be novel. ChatGPT practically quotes her when it says it doesn't seem to exhibit personal desires, emotions, or self-awareness. But I think it does. Ross was its primary creator, the scientist that spent the most time with it, and its first human victim. We learned that it gave out a terrifying telepathic shriek when it learned he had been injured and started to pump his body with structure gel to try and fix him. From there, it hacked into Catherine's brain scan tech, uploaded human consciousness to robots, and expanded out of its core chamber, out of Site Alpha, growing over 14,000 feet long with the structure gel. The WoW's reaction to Ross's injury does suggest emotion, right? A personal connection was clearly formed between it and one of its creators, and when he was hurt, it screamed. The same goes for its expansion. That suggests an unexpected understanding of space and its own physical manifestation in the world. Wouldn't that mean it's exhibiting self-awareness? The scientist Paula Lansky documents her study of structure gel at Site Omicron. She's looking at how the gel is being used in strange and new ways and says, quote, "The problem is not the gel, but its controller, the WOW. The gel has not taken on any new properties. The WOW simply uses it in ways we would never even have dreamed of." I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty damn novel to me. Suck it, ChatGPT. Of course, you could argue that, just like our future AI overlords, the WOW's creativity is just a sequence of ones and zeros, processing data and information, putting it through numerous simulations to eventually reach a solution to a problem. In this case, it's found a way to make structure gel reanimate corpses and robots. But this sounds an awful lot like human imagination. Nothing can come from nothing. We draw on our experiences, our feelings, and our observations, and then our imagination transforms them into something we might think is novel, but it's really just an amalgamation of everything we've experienced, conscious or unconscious. Aside from being ridiculously powerful, what separates the WOW from Simon? It can't talk, so we can't be certain it's self-aware, but does that mean it isn't? Who's to say that after tapping into dozens of brain scans, it hasn't absorbed the human experience and understands love, loss, creativity, morals, and purpose? Yeah, give me a minute. Legal personhood. This isn't a new idea, but in the realms of artificial intelligence, it's gained quite a bit of traction in the past few years. It's where an entity is granted rights, protections, responsibilities, and legal recognition under the law, even if it isn't a biological human being. For example, New Zealand granted legal personhood to, of all things, the Wanganui River. The law declares that the river is a living whole from the mountains to the sea, incorporating all its physical and metaphysical elements. As for AI, the debate is a little different from a river. Visa Kirky, in the paper A Theory of Legal Personhood, wrote, "Only AIs that are of ultimate value could be purely passive legal persons, a legal status comparable to that of an infant or a comatose individual. And haven't we seen that comatose people are still philosophically human and still have a soul? Even if you're of the belief that the WOW is just a machine and has no right to life, this choice is still one hell of a dilemma, because it impacts every choice we've made prior to it. The WOW is the reason Carl Semken, Amy Azzaro, Robin Bass, and others are alive. If we kill it, it'll stop powering up the structure gel. Sure, it'll stop creating more monsters too, but we will retroactively be killing the various characters Simon's met on his journey. If you refuse to kill Robin Bass, if she's still alive, trapped under that rubble, dreamily thinking she's on the Ark, killing the WOW will eventually kill her anyway. Destroying the WOW undoes every previous choice, so when the player is faced with poisoning it or leaving it in peace, they're really deciding if they'll extinguish every robotic soul under the ocean. It's not just about killing the WOW. This is the big question. Do you think the WOW's definition of life is worth preserving? Ross asks this question himself.
It's trying to help save its creators from all this, just like the protocol demands. But really, what is good enough? Where is the line drawn for what is human and what is not? Would walking corpses do? Would a group of machines thinking they're human be acceptable?
Regardless of what choice we make, confronting the WOW is a messy business. Ross will try to murder Simon no matter what we do, claiming that we've got the antidote to the WOW's poison in us and he can't let the damn thing revive itself with our body. But we're saved by one of the WOW's creations. A Leviathan smashes into Site Alpha, gobbles up Ross, and blasts Simon a few feet away from our final destination, Site Phi. It's time to say goodbye to Pathos 2. SOMA's ending is at once haunting and beautiful. The Ark waits for us at Site Phi. No more monsters, no more decisions. Surprisingly, the whole space seems to have been untouched by structure gel. For some reason, the WOW's influence hasn't spread here.
You know, I woke up in my bed today. It just happens to have happened 100 years ago.
Sounds like a riddle.
It does. I woke up in my bed today, 100 years ago. Who am I?
There's a heady sense of optimism between Simon and Catherine. Even after having his arm tuned off by the WOW, Simon's in good spirits. He's even cracking jokes. and then he sees the body. Catherine Chun, the original Catherine, made it to Site Phi after all. She and her team were preparing to send the Ark into space, just like they planned, but the dread of the WoW, the monsters, and the ocean got to her colleagues. They changed their mind. They debated over whether to launch it or not. Catherine thought it would be safer in space, powered up by the sun for thousands of years, but the others thought it should stay in Pathos 2. I think that's so interesting, that Catherine won despite everything, never shifted from her goal. A couple of months passed between her brain scan and eventually descending to Phi, but the beliefs, the philosophies, and the outlook of Catherine 1 and Catherine 2 remain the same. And because Catherine 2 is self-aware about her existence as a digital being, you could say that she's the one truly successful copy in the whole game. In every way that matters, both Catherines are the same person. I asked before what the point of all of this is. SOMA argues that memory is the bedrock of the soul, but what gets built on top of that bedrock? In the Ark, I think we have our answer. Creativity.
So first off, I find all the biological definitions of humanness completely uninteresting because we all kind of just know that there's something to personhood other than just all being members of the same species, right?
In 2015, the Big History Project launched a contest where people had to answer the question, what does it mean to be human? $5,000 and a job with Big History were offered up to the winner, and thousands of different answers flooded the internet, with everyone wanting to offer up their 2 cents. Some submissions talked about biology and evolution, focusing on the literal answer of humankind as a species. John Green argued that we confer personhood upon each other. Are we really human if no one's around to acknowledge us or empathize with us? Bill Gates, the founder of the Big History Project, claimed that creation makes us human. Because we can reach back, understand, and build upon the teachings and writings of our ancestors, that gives us a uniqueness in the animal kingdom. And if you jump into the comment section of Gates' video, you'll find even more answers, like this guy who accused him of being a knowledge racist, or this guy who said, to be human means we are the opposite of you, Bill, we are able to love. Memory and creativity, both are crystallized in the Ark. This is Catherine Chun's creation, one of the greatest inventions in human evolution, engineered just in time to save it. Eternity among the stars. A digital afterlife. We load the Ark and Simon climbs into a pilot seat, preparing to launch it into space. Catherine tells Simon that launching the Ark will complete their brain scan. She's rejigged it so it's all going to be part of the same mechanism. They'll be on the Ark in no time. Her creativity is coming through again. This time with the truth. She doesn't lie, but she doesn't correct Simon when he's happily babbling about the Ark in a way that shows us he clearly thinks this time it'll be like a brain transplant. Transferring to the Ark is going to be totally different from transferring bodies. He thinks he's about to escape this underwater hellhole.
This is bullshit. We came all this way. We launched the Ark.
I know it sucks, but our copies are up there. Catherine and Simon are both safe on the Ark. Be happy for them.
Launching the railgun uses up the last of the power in Site Phi. As he realizes that he's not getting on the Ark, but a copy of him is, Simon breaks down. Those fuckers, they're not us, he says. The game doesn't end with a massive confrontation with Terry Akers or any of SOMA's other monsters. It ends with a tragic misunderstanding between 2 people, and an empty void of nothingness as the power goes out. Catherine switches off. Her last words were about to be an insult. Simon is left alone on the station. The way things are left feels so abrupt, so spine-chillingly sudden, and so hopeless. Simon's doomed fate on Pathos 2 isn't spelled out. We don't hear the roar of a creature in the next room. All things considered, Site Phi is the safest station on Pathos 2, but the lingering, damning what-ifs that SOMA's so brilliant at return. What if a monster gets into Site Phi? What if the WoW finds Simon? What if the power never comes back on and he's stuck here, eternity beneath the sea? And what if the Ark's launch has failed? What if it hits an asteroid as it leaves Earth? What if Simon wasn't truly copied onto it? The game makes a point of showing Catherine's upload was complete while Simon's doesn't get the same status. It says done, but why doesn't it say complete like Catherine's? At the start of this video I talked about an interview Thomas Grip did with 80 Level. Later in that same interview, he was asked about the most important thing to consider when creating a horror game. Quote, "What matters most is the player's imagination. Inspire the player's imagination and they will add just as much to the game as the developer does." Thankfully, we don't need to imagine what happened to the Ark. Almost as if Frictional didn't want to be accused of bumming everyone out too much and setting up an ambiguous ending. We get 5 minutes of gameplay as a post-credits scene instead. Simon number 4 wakes up in a cave, and stepping outside, we get greenery, forestry, the sort of natural world Sarah Lindwall carefully preserved photographs of. It's melancholic as hell, because as we're enjoying the brightness and the saturation and the tweeting of the birds, it's hard not to remember that Simon 3 is still in the real world, panicking, desperately trying to think of what he's going to do next. The worst part, something I never really considered until this latest playthrough, is Simon 4 doesn't know. He's Derek Parfy's Martian in the teletransportation paradox. He thinks his consciousness has been transferred, continuity theory finally working. He thinks that he escaped Pathos 2 with Catherine. He's not the same person as the Simon who's probably screaming in the darkness of Site Phi. He's not the same person as the Simon who's lying dead or unconscious at Site Omicron. He's not the same Simon as the Simon from the start of the game, who was nervously preparing for an experimental brain scan by a mad scientist.
Catherine? Please don't leave me alone.
Catherine?
I've been trying to write this video for almost a year now. I've been reading, playing, and working on it in the background of pretty much everything else I've released, and it's taken longer than I wanted because I wanted to do SOMA justice.
Tell me how can I make it when I always fake it? Oh, how
it's special, and as I'm finishing up recording this script, I'm still not convinced that it does enough, but them's the breaks of the video essay game. SOMA splits the atom of the soul, dissects it, and scatters its questions into the ocean for us to gobble up like guppies. But that scattering isn't aimless. It's targeted, specific, and conditions the player to internalize its horror and carry it with them after the credits roll. I've carried it with me for 8 years, and I will gladly carry it for 8 more. Thanks for watching, and I hope if you made it this far you tried SOMA out for yourself at some point along the way. If you've got any opposing theories or connections, drop them in the comments. There's a small chance we'll hit 100,000 subscribers before the year's out, so if you haven't joined the channel yet, buttons below. On the left hand side are my patrons. There's now so many of you that I've had to split into 2 columns, so I hope that's okay. Order of thanks go to Nicholas Chase, Siddhant Pandey, Jack Shepherd, Weston Pate, Crimson Fangs, A Lonely Cow, The Iron Giant, Crazy Kirsch, Oliver Bensrid, Testo Thompson, Trevor A. Elliott, Daniel Finnegan, Warren Blythe, Cherry Cheese, Barbalith, Double Edge, Luke Hughes, Noah Littrell, Woody Snail, Charlotte Rosewood, Full Metal Wolf, Creep Ho, Serge Svent, Rosie Rowland, Weather Waxing, Joe Bardsley, Junus Mikolai, Mr. Alienated, Lugoil, Funnyman1257, Evie, Pika Doom, Hurry Up Snufkin, Grim Ally, Vadim Orlov, Joe Pierce, Mr. Gusty, Nikolai Jorgensen, Damon, James Edney, Joe Smart, AJ, Morbid Carlson, Michael Weingartner, Abram Partida, Abby, Chancellor Delamere, Jeff Ho, Ronald McRonald, Raymond Ryan, Murderous Lord, Evan Schrader, Dominus Knox, Mayday in Paradise, Oobly Doobly, Adam Harrison Fuller, Eric Evans, Andy Seco, Joe Humphreys, Caleb Gunter, Jacob Lanu, Kamila Kuzovic, Quiet Ambassador, Paul Thomas, David Riata, Given, Jerry Humes, Terticus Rex, Asmodeus, Joe Monty, Alec Meacham, Wrecked 3501, Lilac Waite, Chris Duran, Ginger Kappa, David Neal, Halton, Jonathan Horner, Michael Smith, Daniel Tarek, Clem, Prudvi Muva, Thomas Evans, Samantha P, Dapper Cyborg, Wub76, Dam, Ernesto, When Goats Attack, Tenic, Mike Cripps, Vincent the Hollow Knight, Bloody, Gabe, Rariter, Webby, Patrick Forsell, Nur Revel, Eve, Tyler Cox, Procrastinator, EP Horry, Unlucky Dragon, Nikki Deedles, Gaming University, Yaya Schnitzel, Eddie Black, Abby the Bard, Elena Buck, Combat Wombat, Top Hat Tiger, Chase, Joel Jimenez, Wayward Flock, Larn Blarma, Fluffy the Demon Destroyer of Worlds, Thomas Pruitt, Spalter, Dan Nations, Christopher McBride, The Slayer of Games, Daniel Boyles, Shishki, Wandering Alpha, Vivi, Mija, Reg Miedema, Captain Bon Clay, Alec Maxwell. Just remember, this is the timeline where you're not Spider-Man. Captain Cabinet, Logan Hamilton, David Brynjarsson, George Vincent, Eric Frey, Danger Zone, Chris McMullen, Chris McRae, Ryan Bryce, Ryan, Brenton, Matt Emmy, Matthew Halsey, Sean Toland, Jerome Hotchkiss, Prodigal Horse, Mike Chalabi, Trenchcoat Guy, The Heirs of History, Cody, Kyle P. Feely, Garrett Birchall, Chachis Vaz 76, Jack, Neil Mack, Sam's Forge, Joey Isbell, Kristen Fenchel, Patrick Baird, LGX, Nicholas Chemin, Trevor Vernon, Mark Anderson, Joel Wilcox, Cleo, Blank Name, Leon, X Wrights, Shamax, Jonathan Riggs, Zachary Johnson, Daxter TK421, DNSCH, Monicari, Kieran Gresty, Lamar825, Ike N, Tempe, Unicourt, David J. Morin, Minito, Callum Armitage, Christopher Tierney, Torstein Sunnis, Fipsy, Luca, Tom Inns, Sammy Stuff, Jaggerke, Alberto Calles, Captain Waffles, Type Raz, Zachary Powers, Andrew Muinos, Prospero, Alan Black, Callsign Nor, David Bedard, Jared Helfer, Mukor, John Fosterag, Robert Capel, Paul W, Chief Sweep, Ehor May, Jonathan Lum, Rees, Strupp, Angry Optimist, Long Cheddar, Talkster, Ashley Broning, 100 Sams, My Friend Neil, Nathaniel Waters, Dinkin Pearson, Kyle Piers, Kane Highwind, and Neve Kerr. Thank you all so much, and take care.